Chapter 663. After Zhang Xiaohua finished speaking, that yellow wind seemed to understand and growled a few times from within the underbrush. All right, since my dear friend has already understood, then this one can be at ease. Currently, there are no longer any disciples of the fragrant religion in the entire Yulon Grand Canyon. You have harmed many disciples. I reckon that the leader of the fragrant religion will soon bring people to encircle and annihilate you. You should quickly bring your boy and find a safe place to hide. Alright, I'm leaving. Since I've already participated in the Yulon Dusk refinement, I think I won't be coming here again. Take care of yourself, May we meet again. After speaking, Zhang Xiaohua did not stay any longer and turned around to leave. He wanted to wait until he was 10 zhang away before taking back the dragon binding ring. Looking at how weak yellow wind was now, he could use the imperial wind technique. No matter what, it would not be able to catch up. As long as he did not let it get close to him, he would not be in any danger. However, just as Zhang Xiaohua turned around, a mournful cry came from within the underbrush. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, but he still ignored it and calmly continued walking. At this moment, that yellow wind staggered out from the underbrush and chased behind him. As it chased, it growled softly from the corner of its mouth. Zhang Xiaohua saw that yellow wind chased after him and was startled. The imperial wind technique flew into the air. He did not dare to let it get close. That yellow wind saw that Zhang Xiaohua had flown up, but it stood on the ground without moving and only growled. Its big tail swung weakly behind and its small mouth kept pointing in one direction. Zhang Xiaohua did not understand at first, but yellow wind was not in a hurry. It closed its eyes for a moment, and its body slowly flew up. Its sharp little claws pointed in the direction where the little mouth was pointing, and pointed again and again. Standing in the air, Zhang Xiaohua used his hand to touch his chin. He seemed to have understood the meaning of yellow wind. It should be telling him to go there. However, what was the point of going there? His orchid dusk refinement had already ended. What he needed to do the most now was to quickly leave the valley. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua hesitating in the air, yellow wind landed on the ground. After panting for a while, it staggered back into the bushes and picked up little Martin with its teeth with great difficulty. It seemed to be using all its strength to slowly float up. When it was only 3 inches above the ground, it was about to head in the direction that Zhang Xiaohua had pointed out. Seeing Huang Feng so anxious, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but wonder if this was a trap set by Huang Feng. However, when she saw Huang Feng floating in the air with great difficulty and the look of anticipation in its eyes when it turned back and the dragon binding hoop that was tightly bound to Huang Feng, Zhang Xiaohua's courage was boosted. She thought to herself, this fellow is so weak, and I have the dragon binding hoop that can restrain it at any time. Why should I be afraid of it? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua cast a spell and pointed her finger. The dragon binding hoop flew up and dragged Huang Feng towards the direction that it had pointed out. Zhang Xiaohua carefully followed behind it, maintaining a distance of a few feet. After flying for less than 10 minutes, Huang Feng couldn't hold on any longer. It turned around and rolled its eyes. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly used the dragon binding hoop to put it down. Huang Feng placed little Martin on the ground and stood there panting non-stop. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and pointed at the small Martin on the ground. Then, she pointed at the small Martin in her arms and smiled, "Dear friend, if you don't mind, let me carry this small Martin for you first. What do you think?" When Huang Feng heard this, it seemed to understand. It couldn't bear to look at the boy in front of it and walked forward with great difficulty. Then, it stopped and turned around to look at little Martin. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and walked over. She bent down and carried little Martin in her arms. Yes, she was carrying it. Actually, little Martin was as big as a mouse. Zhang Xiaohua could carry it with one hand. At this moment, little Martin's breathing seemed to be a little stronger than yesterday. However, it was still intermittent. Its body was no longer cold, but it wasn't much stronger than yesterday. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua held little Martin in front of her chest, trying to warm it up with her body temperature. Maybe it was because Zhang Xiaohua's body was obviously bigger than Huang Feng, or maybe it was because Zhang Xiaohua's body temperature was higher than Huang Feng. In any case, little Martin leaned on Zhang Xiaohua's chest and actually rubbed its little head slightly. It squeezed into Zhang Xiaohua's arms again before it rested in Zhang Xiaohua's arms. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that this little guy thinks of me as its mother? In the distance, when Huang Feng saw this scene, a trace of jealousy and a strange light flashed across its eyes. After settling little Martin down, Zhang Xiaohua pointed with her finger. The two dragon-binding hoops lined up side by side and carefully supported Huang Feng, trying not to let it exert any strength as it flew rapidly in front. Zhang Xiaohua continued to stay far away, carefully following behind. Originally, she thought that Huang Feng was pointing to a very close place. Unexpectedly, under Huang Feng's guidance, they actually walked for half a day. When it was close to noon and the sun had risen to its highest point, they finally arrived at the top of a tall mountain. Zhang Xiaohua landed from the sky and looked left and right. He didn't find anything strange. At least, he didn't find any traps. Hence, he continued to let the dragon-binding hoops support Huang Feng. Under Huang Feng's guidance, they went around a straight cliff and flew down. Right at the top of the cliff, there was a small cave facing the south. It was just big enough for one person to enter. Seeing Huang Feng's guidance in midair, Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to scan the cave. She didn't find anything strange inside and sent Huang Feng into the cave first. Then, she circled around the cave. This cave was on top of the cliff and was extremely high up. If not for Zhang Xiaohua's imperial wind technique, even the levitation technique from before wouldn't be able to safely fly here, not to mention martial arts lightness skill. In Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, even the most profound lightness skill in the pugilistic world wouldn't be able to reach this cave from the top of the cliff or from the bottom of the mountain. Furthermore, this cave was extremely small. On top of the huge cliff, it wasn't obvious at all. If not for Huang Feng's guidance, Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't have been able to find this place. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense followed the dragon-binding hoop into the cave. Seeing Huang Feng standing there obediently and waiting, Zhang Xiaohua then entered the cave with ease. After entering the cave, Zhang Xiaohua then realized that she was wrong. This place was only a passageway in the cave and there was still a long way ahead. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua could only bend down and follow behind Huang Feng. As they went deeper into the cave, the passageway became higher and higher. Zhang Xiaohua could slowly straighten her back. Furthermore, what made Zhang Xiaohua the happiest was that there were fist-sized luminous pearls embedded in the passageway. It was these luminous pearls that lit up the entire passageway. After walking for the time needed to drink a cup of tea, they seemed to have reached the middle of the mountain. The passageway finally came to an end. What greeted them was a rather large space. To Zhang Xiaohua, it was only rather large. To Huang Feng, it was probably huge. Once they entered the hall, Zhang Xiaohua immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Because what greeted them was the corpse of a black dog lying on the floor of the hall. Black lightning. Zhang Xiaohua's first reaction was, this must be black lightning. Needless to say, Huang Feng had appeared but black lightning was nowhere to be seen. Zhang Xiaohua originally thought that black lightning had died long ago. However, after hearing from Lu Chaoxian and the rest that night, there was another angry roar other than Huang Feng. Zhang Xiaohua vaguely felt that something was amiss. Now that she saw the corpse of black lightning, she immediately understood why Huang Feng had gone crazy and wanted to kill the disciples of the fragrant cult. Black lightning had been killed, how could Huang Feng not seek revenge? In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's hatred towards Huang Feng lessened by a little. However, he still did not dare to take back the dragon binding ring. When Huang Feng saw the corpse of black lightning, it let out a sorrowful cry and walked towards it. Zhang Xiaohua used the dragon binding ring to send it over as she slowly walked over. However, when Zhang Xiaohua saw the tragic state of black lightning, her heart couldn't help but palpitate. Black lightning was the same size as the black dog that Zhang Xiaohua usually saw. It had square ears and a short tail. However, it was lying on the floor with its forelegs dangling in front of its chest and abdomen. Its abdomen had been cut open from chest to abdomen. The soil around Black Lightning's corpse had been soaked black by the blood that flowed out from Black Lightning. Even Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached when he saw such a tragic state, let alone Huang Feng. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and walked forward. She first looked at Huang Feng, then pointed at Black Lightning. Huang Feng nodded slightly and walked away. Zhang Xiaohua squatted down and opened up Black Lightning's wound to take a closer look. He was very curious as to why someone would kill Black Lightning. What exactly could he find from Black Lightning's body? Zhang Xiaohua had studied Qi Huang before, so he was very familiar with the human body. Of course, he wasn't unfamiliar with Black Lightning's body either. Based on Zhang Xiaohua's impression of the human body, he couldn't find anything missing even after looking at it for a long time. Maybe it's his style of killing people. Zhang Xiaohua could only think so. Then, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and said to the distant Huang Feng, "My dear friend, after seeing your friend's corpse, I can understand your difficulties. However, even though you are grieving, you still need to distinguish between right and wrong. To be honest, with your divine powers, even I am no match for you, much less a disciple of the fragrant cult. Even an inner disciple wouldn't be able to harm you. I think that the person who killed your friend must be someone with great martial arts skills. If I'm not mistaken, it should be someone from the upper echelons of the fragrant cult. If you want revenge, you should look for," at this point, he stuttered. Obviously, the upper echelons of the fragrant cult were also members of the fragrant cult. Huang Feng killed a disciple of the fragrant cult, it seemed. Who knew that Huang Feng ignored him and walked to a corner. After standing there for a long time, those silver eyes opened again and a ray of silver light shot out. Chapter 664. About half a day's journey southwest from the mountain peak where Zhang Xiaohua was located, a group of male and female disciples were still busily searching for spiritual herbs in a lush green forest. Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, who was leading the group, sat proudly on a red horse. His thin chin was slightly stretched forward, and he squinted his eyes to look at the sunlight that shone through the leaves. He had a complacent look on his face. Senior Marshal Sister Xia, who was beside him, had completely lost the arrogance of a senior marshal sister. She looked at the excited disciples who found spiritual herbs from time to time, and then looked at the jade boxes piled up like a mountain on the several carriages behind her. She was convinced and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, I finally understand why the Hall Master gave you this important task before we set off. In such a difficult and dangerous time, you can actually make such a calm judgment and collect so many spiritual herbs and treasures for our hall. Could this be the legendary fearless in the face of danger? As a senior marshal sister, I am convinced." Junior Marshal Brother Zhao waved his hand and said, "Senior Marshal Sister Xia, you flatter me. It was just a moment of luck. Moreover, this junior marshal brother has always been in the Jianghu and has seen many such tricks. If Senior Marshal Sister Xia had half of this junior marshal brother's experience, then your achievements would definitely be more than double of this junior marshal brother's." Senior Marshal Sister Xia smiled like a flower and said, "Look at what you're saying. Everyone says that Junior Marshal Brother Zhao knows how to conduct himself and is a first-class figure in the hall." Senior Marshal Sister didn't care about it before, but now it seems that no matter whether it's handling matters or decision-making, they are all absolutely brilliant. Compared to some of the so-called direct disciples, you are not just a little bit better. Hearing this, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao's face turned cold. He turned his head to look at a male disciple who was squatting in the distance and carefully picking spiritual herbs. He curled his lips and sneered, "Direct disciples? What direct disciples are there now?" Then, he looked at the world outside the forest and muttered, perhaps, only the disciples on Lingering Fragrance Peak can be direct disciples. Senior Marshal Sister Xia also had a look of longing and said, "Yes, I always thought that my martial arts were excellent. But after seeing the inner disciples, I realized that I was just a frog in a well." Then he added, "Not only is junior apprentice brother Zhao meticulous, decisive, and able to see the big picture, his martial arts are also second to none. Moreover, he has obtained the favor of the hall master. This Lingering Fragrance Peak will open its doors to junior apprentice brother sooner or later." Junior Marshal brother Zhao's face flushed red. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior Marshal Sister Xia is also ordinary. Don't all the female disciples in this hall follow Senior Marshal Sister's lead? Furthermore, our fragrant religion has always prioritized female disciples. In the future, Senior Sister Xia will have many more opportunities to enter Lingering Fragrance Peak than I do. And, if Senior Sister Xia gains any advantages, you will have to guide me." Senior Marshal Sister Xia understood tacitly. She covered her mouth and laughed. "Junior Marshal brother Zhao is praising us too much. We are in the same boat. After this section, Junior Marshal brother Zhao will definitely soar to the sky. Senior Marshal Sister is still waiting for your guidance." "Ha ha ha," Junior Marshal brother Zhao laughed softly. "Since Senior Marshal Sister says we are in the same boat, then we will not distinguish between each other. In the future, we will support each other and progress together." After he finished speaking, he inadvertently glanced in another direction. There were a few female disciples bent over and seemed to be busy as well. At this moment, one of the tall female disciples tilted her body and let out a low cry. Junior Marshal brother Zhao unconsciously moved his body and was about to go in that direction. But then he coughed softly and pretended to have just seen it. He raised his head and smiled. "Junior Marshal Sisters have also worked hard. I wonder what happened over there." Senior Marshal Sister Xia looked at Junior Marshal brother Zhao and smiled thoughtfully. "Oh, they must have accidentally bumped into something. And, look, the others have also gone over. There was no warning, so it shouldn't be a big matter." Then she said, "The most dangerous things have been avoided under Junior Marshal brother's lead. What is this small matter?" "Oh, that's right, a few days ago, the last signal sent by the inner court disciples was unclear. They must have reached the entrance of the valley. Also, the ferocious beast's roar was also in that direction. There hasn't been any movement in the past few days, so they must have all gone out, right?" Junior Marshal brother Zhao's eyes were still slightly slanted as he looked in that direction from time to time. He said absent-mindedly, "Perhaps they have safely evacuated, or perhaps they were killed by the ferocious beast. Either way, it happened at the entrance of the valley, far away from us. Also, the ferocious beast should have returned to the west. Our east side should be safe. Sigh, these junior sisters should be cultivating properly in the hall. Bringing them here really makes me worry a lot." Senior Marshal Sister Xia probed. "Junior Marshal brother Zhao is wise and powerful. You are also favored by the hall master. You must be the idol in the hearts of all the female disciples. If not for the fact that I am much older than you, I would definitely admire you." Looking at Junior Marshal brother's appearance, it seems, Junior Marshal brother Zhao was taken aback. He immediately retracted his wandering gaze and smiled apologetically. "Look at what Senior Marshal Sister is saying. Senior Marshal Sister is at the age of a flower. Not to mention me, even the disciples in the hall, which one of them doesn't look forward to speaking to Senior Marshal Sister? It's just that Senior Marshal Sister's standards are too high and you have never looked us in the eye." Senior Marshal Sister Xia looked at Junior Marshal brother Zhao with a hint of charm in her eyes. She said softly, "Senior Marshal Sister doesn't know that Junior Marshal brother also has such thoughts." Then, her face blushed a little and her voice became even softer. "Junior Marshal brother's charm, I have also seen it with my own eyes." When these words came out, Senior Marshal Sister Xia's head had already fallen to the ground. Junior Marshal brother Zhao was taken aback. He looked at Senior Marshal Sister Xia, who had lowered her head, then turned his head to look at the tall lady who had already returned to normal. The corner of his mouth raised, as if he had made some sort of decision. He turned his head back and echoed, "Junior Marshall sister's great love, Junior Marshall brother will remember it." If it wasn't for this secluded orchid evening, Junior Marshall brother wouldn't know the person in his heart, also, Junior Marshall brother. Senior Marshall sister Xia's face turned even redder. At this moment, there was a sudden cry of surprise from outside the forest. Then, there was a cry of surprise, "Senior! Senior Marshall brother Zhao, quickly, quickly come and see." Junior Marshall brother Zhao was taken aback. His face immediately revealed a look of displeasure, and he scolded loudly, "What are you shouting for? Lower your voice, aren't you afraid of attracting the ferocious beasts?" Then, he said warmly, "Senior Marshall sister, let's go and take a look. Perhaps something has happened." Okay, Senior Marshall sister Xia still hadn't escaped from the mood just now. She lowered her head and replied obediently. Even when she urged the horse forward, she was still absent-minded. Occasionally, she would use her hands to touch her hot cheeks. When Junior Marshall brother Zhao rushed out of the forest, he looked in the direction that the disciple who had long been scared pale pointed. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, and his face instantly changed color. He saw that in the distance, there was a black mass of blood wolves. At a glance, he couldn't tell the exact number of blood wolves. They were like small squirming black dots, and were rapidly running towards them. Looking at the dust raised by them, could it be that there were thousands of them? Junior Marshall brother Chen was first shocked, and then carefully looked in the direction that the pack of blood wolves were moving in. It seemed that they weren't moving towards the forest they were in, but should be passing by the forest. Thus, his heart calmed down a little, and he whispered, "Don't be noisy, quickly hide in the forest. These blood wolves are just passing by. As long as we are careful not to be discovered by them, we should be fine." The disciple on duty was very puzzled, and said, "Senior Marshall brother Chen, if we run away now, wouldn't it be better for us to be as far away from the forest as possible?" Senior Marshall brother Chen angrily said, "What do you know? If we leave, what about the carriage and spiritual herbs here? These are all things that our hall master needs. Even if we have to pay with our lives, we can't lose these things. But, if we leave first and wait for the blood wolves to pass by, then we can come back. Isn't it the same?" The disciple still wanted to argue. Senior Marshall brother Chen was so angry that he laughed. At this time, if we ride a horse, wouldn't the sound of the horse's hooves be a signal to the blood wolves? But if we leave the horse alone in the forest, what would the horse know? Once the blood wolves pass by, they would have already left their nest. At the same time, they would also attract the blood wolves. We can only stay here with the horse to protect the carriage and spiritual herbs. Then he said, "Quickly, go and inform all the disciples to pull their carriages tightly, and take good care of the horses. Don't let them neigh and attract the blood wolves." Seeing that disciple run into the forest, Junior Marshall brother Chen reluctantly looked into the forest and whispered, "Senior Marshall sister Xia, let's go to the back of the forest and see if there are any traces of other ferocious beasts." Senior Marshall sister Xia was already infatuated, and now that she was panicking, she could only nod blankly and said, "I will listen to Junior Marshall brother's instructions." Then, the two of them led the horses and slowly walked into the forest. When the disciples in the forest heard the words of the disciple on duty and senior brother Chen's order, they hurriedly packed up their things and carefully hid. The disciple who was watching the horse also pulled the horse and used his hand to cover the horse's mouth, afraid that it would make the slightest sound. When Junior Marshall brother Chen and Senior Marshall sister Xia led the horses to the back of the forest, there was only silence. Junior Marshall brother Chen looked around and whispered, "Senior Marshall sister, tie the horses here." Senior Marshall sister Xia didn't understand, but she still obediently tied the horses to the tree. After tying the horses, Junior Marshall brother Chen took Senior Marshall sister Xia's hand. Senior Marshall sister Xia was shocked and immediately blushed. She gently withdrew her hand and murmured, "Junior Marshall brother, although I am in love with you, but you also have to respect me. Even if I am willing, but in broad daylight, and with all the other Senior Marshall brothers over there, it is really inconvenient. When Junior Marshal Brother Chen heard this, his heart also swayed. He squeezed the smooth little hand in his palm and whispered, "But Senior Marshal Sister Xia knows my feelings. I miss you day and night." Just as Senior Marshal Sister Xia said, this place is really not cheap. Moreover, the pack of wolves will be here soon. Let's hurry and leave. When we reach a safe place, I will, When Senior Marshal Sister Xia heard this, she was shocked and her thoughts faded away. She asked curiously, "Didn't you ask the disciples to hide in the forest? If we don't stay in the forest, where else can we go?" Junior Marshal Brother Chen pulled her hand. "Even if we can hide in the forest, how can it be better than the wilderness over there? If we are not discovered by the pack of wolves, it won't be too late for us to come back. Besides, there are no disciples over there." As he spoke, he had already pulled Senior Marshal Sister Xia and walked far away. Senior Marshal Sister Xia's mind was already in a mess and she followed them. There was not a single sound in the silent forest. Moreover, there were a few birds chirping, which made the forest even more serene. The thousands of blood wolves didn't directly come to this strange forest. They just went far away from the forest and went in another direction. At this moment, 2 long neighs of horses came from the forest, causing the faces of the disciples in the forest to be filled with shock. Chapter 665. 2 horse neighs rang out, causing the faces of all the disciples to turn pale. As for the horses that were already very irritable just now, they were forcefully stopped by the disciples. At this moment, they could no longer endure it. They all let out a li sound and immediately dug their hooves, wanting to flee far away. "Senior Chen. Where is Senior Xia?" Standing behind the tree, the well-hidden tall disciple quickly stood up and asked the patrolling disciple. The disciple looked back in horror and said, "I don't know. Senior Chen only asked me to tell you that he himself." Without waiting for the disciple to finish speaking, the tall disciple waved his hand and said, "Quick, it's too late. These 2 horses are probably the horses that the 2 of them are riding. Disciples, listen up. Ride your horses. If you don't have a horse, you can only use your qing gong. The horse neighing just now will definitely attract the blood wolves. These wolves are not something that we can fight against. Sai, try your best to head east. The other directions are too close to the wolves." After he finished speaking, he jumped up and quickly ran to the tall female disciple who was hiding nearby and shouted, "Quick, get on the horse." Behind him, the patrolling disciple shouted, "Senior Chen asked us to guard this spiritual herb well." How could the tall male disciple respond to him? He reached out and untied the horse on the carriage beside him and handed the reins to the tall female disciple. That female disciple jumped onto the saddle. Immediately after, a petite disciple behind her shouted, "Senior Xia, wait for me. Quick, get on." The tall male disciple stretched out his hand and carried the female disciple onto the back of the horse. "What about you? You don't have a horse?" the tall female disciple asked with concern. "Paw!" The disciple's palm hit the horse's butt. The horse felt the pain and immediately ran away. Taking advantage of this moment, the tall male disciple used his qing gong and followed behind. He whispered, "Wasn't there a horse neighing just now? I will ride that horse." "All right, go quickly. We will wait for you in front." After saying that, the tall female disciple didn't waste any more time. She shook the reins and led the petite female disciple behind her, urging the horse to move forward. Not long after, all the disciples mounted their horses and rushed out. Even the disciple who was patrolling earlier also followed them. Who would care about the precious medicinal herbs that were left on the horse carriage in the forest? In the distance, the pack of wolves that heard the neighing of the horses suddenly changed their direction and charged towards this nameless little forest. In the forest, the direction in which the disciples were fleeing was the east side of the Yulon Grand Canyon. In the far east, on a steep cliff, within a hidden cave, Huang Feng stood quietly for a moment. The silver eye between his brows opened again, and a silver beam of light shot into a corner of the cave. Zhang Xiaohua carried little Martin in his arms and distanced himself from Huang Feng. He had suffered a lot under the silver beam of light and was still traumatized. He looked at Huang Feng in confusion. When he entered the cave, he had used his divine sense to scan the cave. There was no fluctuation of the yuan qi of heaven and earth. Even when he saw Huang Feng standing there with difficulty, he knew that it would do something. He also used his divine sense to scan the stone wall in front of it again and again, but he still didn't find anything out of the ordinary. However, when the silver beam of light shot straight into the stone wall suddenly changed. First, it was like a stone thrown into water, creating circular ripples. The ripples spread from the center of the stone wall to the entire stone wall. Then, a black dot gradually appeared in the center of the ripples. This black dot grew bigger and bigger as the ripples spread. Finally, it grew to the size of half a person's height and stopped moving. It was actually a door that led to the inside. This! Zhang Xiaohua looked at it from afar, his eyes wide open and his mouth agape. He had been releasing his divine sense all this while, but such a huge commotion was obviously a trick of the immortal Tao. However, his divine sense didn't detect the slightest fluctuation of the yuan qi of heaven and earth. What kind of trick is this? Zhang Xiaohua was extremely depressed. It seemed that as his cultivation increased, the things he encountered became more and more unbelievable. That Huang Feng turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua, then slowly walked in. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to use his divine sense to enter, but the door had the ability to block his divine sense. He couldn't even use his divine sense. When he reached the door and bent down to look inside, he realized that he couldn't even see what was inside. Is this Huang Feng's trap? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought. He immediately used his divine sense to activate the dragon binding ring. As expected, his divine sense was like a stone thrown into the sea, there was no reaction at all. This made him anxious. At this time, a small head popped out from the door. It was that Huang Feng. It stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a while before shrinking back. It seemed to be urging Zhang Xiaohua. Damn, this little thing actually dares to look down on this Xiaoxia. Zhang Xiaohua stroked the soft little Martin in his hand. His courage was immediately boosted. He coughed and slowly walked into the door. The door was very strange. It was similar to the light curtain that Zhang Xiaohua usually used when he used his escape technique. After passing through the door, there was a short walkway in front of him. Zhang Xiaohua could only bend his waist and walk a few steps forward. Soon after, he walked into a bright hall. This hall was much smaller than the one outside, but there were many luminous pearls embedded in the walls. Therefore, even though there was no sunlight, it was still abnormally bright. Once he walked into the hall, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were immediately attracted by everything in front of him. The hall was relatively spacious. There was only a large protrusion on the stone wall at the front. It looked like a platform. At this moment, there was a small black dog lying on the platform. Its size was about the same as the little Martin in his hand. Beside the black dog, there were two silver balls. One was very small, about the size of an egg, while the other was extremely large, about the size of a fist. Although these two small balls appeared very small in the large hall, Zhang Xiaohua's gaze was immediately attracted to the silver ball the moment he entered. Moreover, his gaze landed on the silver ball and he was unwilling to look away for a long time. It was as if the silver ball was able to attract his attention. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua walk in, Huang Feng, who had entered earlier, walked to the bottom of the platform and looked up at the platform. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, he forcefully shifted his gaze away from the balls. He raised his hand and controlled the dragon binding hoop to send Huang Feng onto the platform. Huang Feng climbed onto the platform and walked to the front of the black dog. It lowered its head and sniffed. Then, it growled at Zhang Xiaohua and pointed its paw at the little Martin. Following which, it walked to the other side of the platform. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand at first, but when he walked to the front of the black dog and touched it with his hand and listened carefully, he understood. This black dog was like the little marten. Its breathing was very weak and intermittent. Its body was also very cold. If it wasn't for the breathing from its mouth and nose, he would have thought that it was already dead. Needless to say, Huang Feng was definitely thinking about the bottle of stone milk. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged slightly and carefully placed the little marten on the platform. When it saw Zhang Xiaohua being so careful, Huang Feng revealed a gratified expression. Zhang Xiaohua took out the jade bottle and just like yesterday, he fed a drop of stone milk into the black dog's mouth. Only then did he carry the little marten in his arms. Obviously, this little marten was Zhang Xiaohua's protective talisman. If he didn't carry it, who else would he carry? When it saw Zhang Xiaohua walking away, Huang Feng walked over and lowered its head to take a look. It cupped its beak and nodded at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and waited for Huang Feng's next arrangement. However, he believed that since he had given Huang Feng so many benefits, this intelligent beast wouldn't want his life anymore. Huang Feng lifted its head from the black dog and stared straight at Zhang Xiaohua. It stared at him for nearly the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Zhang Xiaohua felt his hair stand on end from Huang Feng's stare and almost jumped up. He thought to himself, what is this bastard trying to do? Your child is in my hands, what are you trying to do? Huang Feng stared for a while and lowered its head as if it was thinking. After a while, it slowly walked to the two round beads and raised its little paw to point at the larger bead. Then, it pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and let out a low growl. Eh! Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He pointed at the round bead and then at his own nose. When he saw Huang Feng nodding, Zhang Xiaohua knew that Huang Feng wanted to give the round bead to him. Hence, he quickly said politely, "Don't, dear friend. Helping others is the source of happiness. This little brother is only giving away 2 drops of stone milk. It's nothing much. You don't have to be so polite." Even though he said that, he walked to the side of the platform. When it saw Zhang Xiaohua walking over, Huang Feng tactfully pushed the round bead away and took a few steps to the side. The round bead rolled slowly after being pushed by Huang Feng. The platform wasn't big and soon, it would roll to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and quickly stepped forward to catch it with his left hand. The bead was very light and almost weightless. Zhang Xiaohua reached out to pinch it. It was hard, but he didn't know what it was made of. Very naturally, Zhang Xiaohua took the round bead in front of her eyes and carefully observed it. However, this bead was just a piece of silver, and she couldn't see any clues. Zhang Xiaohua focused her divine sense on this round bead again. However, at this moment, Huang Feng, who was standing on the stage not far away, sneaked a few steps closer while Zhang Xiaohua was picking up the bead. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense entered the bead to find out what was going on, Huang Feng immediately flew up like a real yellow wind and blew towards Zhang Xiaohua. Chapter 666. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was just about to enter the round pearl to take a closer look at the mysterious gift that Huang Feng had prepared for her. Then, she felt a gust of wind blow past and immediately felt that something was amiss. Just as she was about to raise her head, a yellow shadow flashed past her eyes. Following which, she felt a sharp pain in her finger which was holding the round pearl. She saw that the blood was flowing out from her finger. Zhang Xiaohua was enraged and she raised her head to look at Huang Feng, who had just landed on the ground. From Huang Feng's eyes, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be able to see the mockery in his eyes. "You?" Zhang Xiaohua really didn't know what to say. She had always been on guard against Huang Feng's trap, but she never expected that in the end, she would still fall into it. Thinking about the deadly poison on the bodies of the inner and outer court disciples at the entrance of the valley, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was alarmed. Following which, a vicious look appeared in her eyes. Looking at the dragon binding hoop on Huang Feng's body, her right hand was about to form a seal. However, Her right hand was still carrying little Martin and she couldn't possibly let little Martin die on the ground. Just as she was about to carry little Martin in her arms, Zhang Xiaohua completely didn't notice that the blood on her finger was flowing down her finger and all of it flowed onto the silver pearl in her hand. As the blood seeped into the pearl, the silver pearl seemed to have a trace of brilliance. That brilliance was extremely faint, then dimmed, then became gentle. Blood also flowed out continuously from the wound on Zhang Xiaohua's finger. Just as Zhang Xiaohua carried little Martin in his arms and was about to form a seal, she inadvertently saw the change in the pearl in her left hand. At this moment, that silver pearl had already emitted a gentle silver light which completely covered Zhang Xiaohua's left hand. Furthermore, the silver light flashed and started to turn slightly like an eye. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately used his divine sense to scan it. Just as his divine sense came into contact with the round pearl, that silver pearl instantly produced a huge attractive force which directly pulled his divine sense into it. At the same time, the left hand which was holding onto the round pearl was similarly sucked in by a force and all the vital energy in her body flowed into the round pearl in her hand. The round pearl's pull on Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was so violent that in this situation where Zhang Xiaohua was caught off guard, he immediately felt as if the world was spinning and following which, a splitting pain in his head. After he calmed down a little, he saw a somewhat familiar scene in front of him. A gray space, up, down, left, and right, there was no end in sight. There was no place where light could be seen but it was still unknown where the light came from, allowing Zhang Xiaohua to see everything around him. Waves of air flowed chaotically and there was no sound at all. It was dead silent. Suddenly, from a very far end, a very small dot appeared. This dot became bigger and bigger and in just a few breaths' time, it was so close that its outline could be seen clearly. This was something that Zhang Xiaohua had never seen before. It was a strange thing that seemed to have a life of its own. However, in this gray space, he could not see the size of this thing. It was not right to call it a thing. It was like a squid in the sea. On its seemingly soft and huge body, there was a huge silver eye. And around its body, there were dozens of long tentacles. Oh, those tentacles were swaying slightly in the air and it was almost impossible to tell how many there were. And at the top of these tentacles, there were silver eyes of different sizes. It was like swimming in the water. The number of tentacles that could not be seen moved slightly and that thing moved very far away. The distance could not be measured. Zhang Xiaohua could only feel that this distance was really terrifying. All the silver eyes on this thing, except for the biggest one on its body which was wide open, were slightly closed and did not open. That thing moved rapidly and the silver eyes looked behind it from time to time. There was obvious anxiety and fear in its eyes, as if it was escaping. At this moment, a kind of fluctuation suddenly came. It was a fluctuation that Zhang Xiaohua felt very familiar with. Then, in the distance where this thing had just appeared, a bright spot flashed. Then, in just a breath's time, that bright spot was in front of her eyes. It was as fast as light and the thing in front of her suddenly turned around. All the tentacles on its body fluttered together and all the silver eyes on its tentacles opened. Just as that bright spot was about to reach its body, all of them shot out a silver brilliance. The huge eye on its body shot out a huge light beam. All the light beams gathered together and collided directly with that bright spot. Like a shocking explosion, the entire gray space was lit up. The brightness was so bright that even Zhang Xiaohua almost had to close her eyes. That bright spot was originally shooting straight at that thing's huge eye. After being obstructed by the light beams, it immediately changed direction and moved slightly to the side. It very neatly cut off 3 of the thing's tentacles of different sizes. At this moment, the huge light beam that collided with the bright spot also changed direction after being reflected by the bright spot. It was almost in the same direction as the bright spot, shooting towards the endless space. Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense was not an exception. It was the first to be sucked in. The bright spot and the 3 tentacles with 3 silver eyes that had just been cut off were also sucked in by the shrinking hole. By the time the thing extended its other tentacles in an attempt to fish something out of the shrinking hole, the hole had already shrunk to the size of a needle. The last scene that Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense saw through the hole was the octopus-like thing. Its huge eyes were filled with terror as its entire body flashed and disappeared. Behind it was another ray of light that calmly streaked across the space that had regained its grayish appearance. Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense was not an exception. It was the first to be sucked in. The bright spot and the 3 tentacles with 3 silver eyes that had just been cut off were also sucked in by the shrinking hole. When the thing extended its other tentacles in an attempt to fish something out of the shrinking hole, the hole had already shrunk to the size of a needle. The last scene that Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense saw through the hole was the octopus-like thing. When Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness entered the hole, it first paused for a moment. Then, it rapidly slid into the hole as if it was falling from the sky. Faster and faster, faster and faster, all the scenery was left behind. Zhang Xiaohua screamed and sat up. His forehead was covered in sweat. As if he had just had a nightmare, Zhang Xiaohua covered his face with both hands and wiped away the sweat on his forehead. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and opened his eyes. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he looked at the limp Huang Feng not far away. He formed a seal and was about to release it without hesitation. But at this moment, he was shocked to find that there was not a single trace of vital energy in his meridians. At the same time, the intense headache in his head came again. It was the same feeling as when he was deciphering Refining the World in Rejuvenation Valley and his consciousness had been depleted by 10 times. Zhang Xiaohua checked again and couldn't help but gasp. His consciousness had been depleted once again. Even the essence of herbalism in his Naiwen palace was so small that it couldn't be any smaller. There was only a tiny bit of it left. This. Zhang Xiaohua was really angry. Without hesitation, he drew out the jade water sword and went forward to stab Huang Feng to death. I treated it with all my heart and even helped it save its child and the little black puppy. Although these 2 little lives can't be said to be completely saved, but I have tried my best. This little beast actually wants to harm me. And it did it when I saw a rare treasure and almost completely let my guard down. If this spread to the pugilistic world, wouldn't this Xiaoxia's reputation, Zhang Xiaohua gritted his teeth hatefully and stabbed the short sword. But the moment it pierced into Huang Feng's chest, Zhang Xiaohua saw Huang Feng's calm eyes. He even saw the silver eye in between its brows. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Wasn't this the silver eye that he saw in his consciousness earlier? Right, where was the silver bead in his hand earlier? He was so focused on killing Huang Feng that he forgot about it. Xiaoxia, who had fallen into the other party's trap, was obviously enraged and had forgotten the most important thing. Zhang Xiaohua did not keep the jade water sword in his right hand, but raised his left hand instead. The silver bead that was the size of a fist had long disappeared. There was only a crack in the middle of his palm. And that crack opened with great difficulty according to Zhang Xiaohua's will. Then, Zhang Xiaohua felt as if he had opened his eyes. It was as if he was extremely sleepy and did not have enough sleep. He was so lazy that he did not want to open his eyes, but he had no choice but to open them slightly. This. Zhang Xiaohua almost cried out. Not to mention the strange feeling he actually saw a silver eye that was similar to the one on Huang Feng's forehead in the crack in his left hand. It was just that this eye was several times bigger than Huang Feng's. Then, that crack closed tightly. Zhang Xiaohua felt as if he had fallen asleep again. It was as if this was really his third eye, enjoying a sleep that he had never experienced before. Feeling the faint connection between the essence of Dan in his Naiwen palace and the silver eye in his left hand, Zhang Xiaohua very naturally kept the jade water sword that was pointed at Huang Feng's chest. Zhang Xiaohua knew that this was a gift from Huang Feng to him. But the way he gave it to him was a little too strange. When you give it to me, can't you give me a heads up? If not for this Xiaoxia's attentiveness, wouldn't I have killed the innocent just now? Oh, you can't be considered innocent either. That was what Zhang Xiaohua thought. He directly threw the matter of Huang Feng not knowing how to speak to the back of his mind. Chapter 667. At this moment, the main hall was incomparably quiet. Only the ragged breathing of Huang Feng, who was lying in the corner, could be heard from time to time beside Zhang Xiaohua's ears. Zhang Xiaohua formed a hand seal and sent it to the top of the stage. She smiled and said, "Old man, you're clearly in poor health, yet you still force yourself to fly. Do you really think you're the wind?" And Huang Feng had been upgraded from brother to old man from Zhang Xiaohua's mouth. It had to be said that this gift was indeed impressive. As she spoke, Zhang Xiaohua took the little marten out of her embrace. This little fellow really liked Zhang Xiaohua's warm embrace. When it was taken out, it stretched out its little paws, as if it was looking for something to stay. It also smacked its lips in dissatisfaction. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and placed the little marten beside Huang Feng. She thought to herself, "This Xiaoxia is not a wet nurse. There's nothing to feed you." Huang Feng raised its head and licked the little marten beside it. It then walked with difficulty to the little black dog's side. It nudged the little black dog with its mouth and pointed at it with its paws, then at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She also pointed at the little black dog, then at her own nose. That Huang Feng nodded. Zhang Xiaohua was not happy. She shook her head vigorously and said, "Old man, you should take care of them yourself. Taking care of one child is the same as taking care of two children. You'll slowly get used to it. Don't make me do such a difficult task." That Huang Feng acted as if it did not hear her. It walked to the other silver eye and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. It used its paws to point at the round pearl, then at the little black dog. This time, Zhang Xiaohua understood. It meant to give this silver pearl to the little black dog. However, this did not seem to have anything to do with her. After she left, "You can give it to whoever you want. Even if you secretly gave it to your little marten, she would not tell Black Lightning." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua understood but did not nod, Huang Feng continued to ignore her. Then, it walked to its child and looked at it lovingly for a long time. It was so long that Zhang Xiaohua muttered, "What is this old man doing? Why isn't he resting?" Just when Zhang Xiaohua was getting impatient, Huang Feng let out a low growl and closed its eyes for a long time. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of its mouth. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and quickly stopped it. "Old man, please don't torture yourself. You are already suffering from internal injuries." Before she finished speaking, the silver eye between Huang Feng's brows suddenly opened. Then, a ball of silver light appeared. It was as if a silver moon had risen into the sky. The silver eye rose from Huang Feng's brows and slowly flew towards little marten. Then, it stuck to the narrow space between little marten's brows. Huang Feng moved to the front of little marten with difficulty and used its paws to draw across little marten's brows. Then, it immediately pressed down on the silver eye. Then, the silver eye retracted into little marten's forehead. When the silver light disappeared into little marten's forehead, the silver eye also disappeared and a long and narrow mark appeared between little marten's brows. "I see." Zhang Xiaohua involuntarily stretched out her left hand and looked at the mark on her palm. "Sigh, I pity all parents." Zhang Xiaohua sighed and turned to look at Huang Feng. At this moment, Huang Feng looked abnormally weak. Although there was not much change between its brows, there was still a trace of blood at the corner of its mouth. Removing the silver eye from its body must have caused it great harm. Zhang Xiaohua was about to persuade it to rest again when Huang Feng let out a low growl again. However, this time, it seemed to be lacking in energy. Then, Huang Feng made an extremely strange posture. Then, it opened its mouth and a small pearl emitting a faint white light flew out from its mouth. "Ah, what is this?" Zhang Xiaohua was very curious. This Huang Feng had quite a number of pearls on its body. That pearl flew into the air and spun around, emitting a faint white light. In this hall, it was more dazzling than all the other luminous pearls. It was like a full moon hanging in the sky. It seems a little familiar. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, but I've never seen it before. At this moment, Huang Feng waved its little paw again and signaled to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately walked forward. She saw Huang Feng pointing at the black puppy and then at the little marten. Zhang Xiaohua was very confused and asked, "You want me to share this with them?" Huang Feng shook its head. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and stretched out her hand to place the black puppy and the little marten beside Huang Feng. Huang Feng nodded. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "The two of us are cooperating more and more well." Huang Feng seemed to understand and the corners of its mouth curled into a smile. Then, it pointed at the pearl and waved its paw. There was no need for further explanation. Zhang Xiaohua understood. He reached into his robes and pulled out the jade water sword. Then, he slashed at the pearl with all his might. With a crisp paw sound, the bead was immediately split into two halves. At this moment, another poo sound was heard and Huang Feng spat out a large mouthful of blood. This. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. Just now, the silver pupil had a trace of blood flowing out. Why was this so serious? Huang Feng did not dare to delay. With a wave of its two paws, the two halves of the pearl flew in front of the black puppy and the little marten. Huang Feng used its paw to grab the pearl and pressed it against the abdomen of the two little beasts. Then, it seemed to be mumbling something and let out a low growl. Following that, it spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. The pearl in its paw immediately dimmed. Then, Huang Feng's two paws emitted an extremely bright light. It was so bright that Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, the light had disappeared and the pearl in Huang Feng's paw had also disappeared. Following that, a large amount of blood flowed out from Huang Feng's mouth and dyed the yellow fur on its chest red. Then, Huang Feng turned its head with difficulty and stretched out its two paws again. It pointed at the two little beasts and nodded at Zhang Xiaohua with difficulty. Before Zhang Xiaohua could ask what it meant, Huang Feng lay on its back. Its two paws were still stretched out, but this time, it was pointing at the sky. "Io!" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and hurried forward. He did not care if there were any traps in Huang Feng's mouth and nose. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. It turned out that Huang Feng was no longer breathing. It was dead. However, its two large black eyes were still open, and its two small claws were still stretched straight towards the sky. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss. He did not expect that Huang Feng would die at this time. This was an old monster that had harmed the fragrance cult for so many years. From what Lu Lihong and the others said, it had already ruined the peaceful orchid dusk refinement during the previous generation. How could it die so easily? Furthermore, didn't Huang Feng just give birth to a little Huang Feng? Life was so beautiful and the joy of family was right in front of it. How could it bear to leave? I don't understand. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head in confusion. That's right. Although Huang Feng was weak before, ever since he consumed the stone milk, his mental state had improved significantly. The name, 10,000-year stone milk, was not just for show. In the future, who will be able to harm the fragrance cult? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had such a strange thought. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Thinking of Yellow Wind's last action, how could Zhang Xiaohua not know what it meant when it nodded at him? It was still pointing at the two little animals a moment ago, but now it was pointing at the air with its claws. Entrusting two ferocious little beasts to him. Do I have the potential to be a nanny? Zhang Xiaohua shrugged helplessly. Although the sudden death of Huang Feng shocked him, in Zhang Xiaohua's heart, there was only a trace of sadness. After all, Huang Feng had just died under the claws of tens, or even hundreds, of thousands of fragrance cult disciples. Even Zhang Xiaohua himself was almost killed by this thing. Therefore, when he saw Huang Feng entrusting the two little beasts to him, he could not help but feel that it was rather absurd. Can't you wait for these two little things to grow up before you die? Zhang Xiaohua thought in his heart, but he looked at little Martin who was sleeping soundly at the side. Suddenly, his face was obviously startled. Then, it turned into an expression of disbelief. Sigh, Zhang Xiaohua had been surprised too many times today. He could even change the expression on his face with ease. Zhang Xiaohua put his hand on little Martin's mouth and nose in amazement, and then stroked little Martin's fur. At this moment, little Martin's breathing was no longer weak and intermittent. Its breathing was smooth, and its heartbeat was strong. It was no different from an ordinary little beast. Even its body was warm and cozy. He then put his hand on little black puppy's body, and listened to its heartbeat. Indeed, it was the same as little Martin. Its vitality was strong, and it was completely different from its previous state of being on the verge of death. If Zhang Xiaohua had not seen it with his own eyes, he would never have imagined that the little bead that Huang Feng spat out was actually so big. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua understood how Huang Feng died. This bead was obviously something very important to it, something that concerned its life. However, for its boy, and for little black puppy, it did not hesitate to spit out the bead, and gave the hope of life to its child. Then, it resolutely turned and walked towards death. Could it be that it had already made its preparations when we were at the pool? Zhang Xiaohua's nose turned sour. A mother's love was greater than the heavens. No matter if it was a mother of a human or a mother of a beast, they all had the same motherly love. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's hatred towards Huang Feng disappeared without a trace along with this feeling. Chapter 668. Yellow Wind's body was still warm and soft. Zhang Xiaohua walked over and placed its claws on its chest. She whispered, "I don't know if you know that you have the name Yellow Wind. I don't know how to address you, but don't worry. Leave your boy to me. I will raise him well." "Oh, right, your child, does he drink milk?" Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. She hadn't seen Yellow Wind feeding its child for the past few days. What did it eat? Zhang Xiaohua looked at the black puppy and said, "Since this black puppy is entrusted to me, I can only accept it. Don't worry, I will do my best to raise them and teach them to have dreams and ambitions." Speaking of this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Yellow Wind and a Black Lightning have harmed the fragrance cult for many years. When these two little beasts grow up, they must have their mother's magical powers. Could I use this to threaten the fragrance cult? Ha, if the fragrant cult makes this young hero unhappy, I'll immediately have these two little things vent my anger for this young master. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Yellow Wind's open eyes and slowly closed them. Don't worry, old man. I have said everything that needs to be said. If you die with your eyes open, it will be very stressful for me. However, as soon as Zhang Xiaohua let go of his hand, Huang Feng's eyes immediately opened again. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and said, "It can't be, right? What are you worried about?" "Oh, right, I will find a place with good feng shui to bury you and Black Lightning. I will let you rest in peace. I will let you be good friends in life and be neighbors in death. What do you think?" Why aren't you closing your eyes? Sigh, I will raise your little Yellow Wind as my own son. That should be fine, right? After saying that, Zhang Xiaohua closed its eyes. This time, it was able to close its eyes in peace. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. This beast was already dead, how could it still hear? Was she really going to raise this little Martin as her own son? Was she going to give it the surname Zhang? However, looking at the little Martin who was still sleeping soundly and did not know that it had lost its only family member in the world, Zhang Xiaohua felt a wave of pity. In this world, perhaps she was the only person it could rely on. Sigh, Zhang Xiaohua continued to sigh. She turned around and walked out from the hole in the mountain wall. She brought the corpse of Black Lightning, whose stomach had been cut open and died a horrible death, into this secret cave. Looking around, she found a place with soft soil and used the jade water sword to dig 2 small holes. Although it was very inconvenient to use the jade water sword to dig 2 small holes, even though she did not have a single drop of essential chi in her meridians and could not force out the sword ray of the jade water sword, Zhang Xiaohua still carefully and methodically dug the 2 small holes. Following that, she carefully placed Yellow Wind and Black Lightning into the holes. She thought for a moment and recalled the scene when her grandmother passed away. She stood up and walked to the platform. She carried the 2 little beasts who were sleeping soundly and placed them in front of their respective mothers. She said softly, "2 little things, your mothers are about to be buried in peace. I believe you have not seen them since you were born, right?" But the 2 little things still had their eyes tightly shut and did not move. Zhang Xiaohua was helpless. She opened their eyes and let them take a look. The 2 little beasts were extremely impatient and shook their heads slightly, expressing their extreme indignation. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and let go of her hands. No matter what, she had to let them take a look. After burying Yellow Wind and Black Lightning, Zhang Xiaohua raised 2 small bumps on the ground. Then, she used the jade water sword to write the words "Wind" and "Lightning" in front of their respective graves so that they could be separated. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua lifted the 2 little beasts' heads and lightly knocked them on the ground 3 times to express their respective etiquette as boy. The 2 little fellows whined and did not have the slightest awareness of bidding farewell to their loved ones. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and patted the dirt off her hands. She looked left and right. At this moment, the hall was empty and there was nothing left. The only thing left was the last silver eye on the platform. Zhang Xiaohua walked over and took it, putting it into her purse. This thing was left behind by Black Lightning for the black puppy. It was also entrusted by Yellow Wind. Zhang Xiaohua would not take it for herself. Finally, Zhang Xiaohua walked in front of the graves of Yellow Wind and Black Lightning. Finally, he lowered his head in silence for a moment before saying, "Elders, especially Black Lightning, I've never seen you alive. Although you died without knowing why, but you had Yellow Wind to avenge you. In this Yulon Grand Canyon, there were hundreds and thousands of disciples of the incense cult who were buried with you. I didn't know the grudge between you and the incense cult. Now that you're dead, you can die in peace. I will be taking your 2 children away. When they become successful in the future and become outstanding, beasts, I will bring them back to see you." After she finished speaking, she bowed and carried the 2 little beasts. Still holding one in each hand, she turned around and left the hall. Looking at the hole that was still rotating, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. It had been a long time since this thing was sealed. If she did not seal it, her heart would not be at ease. But, how would she seal it? How would he know? After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her left hand and exposed the crack. Then, she imagined opening the eye. However, the eye seemed to be extremely tired. It was not until Zhang Xiaohua exhausted the little bit of consciousness that she had painstakingly accumulated from the Dan Xian in her Naiwen Gong that the silver eye slightly opened a slit. She saw a faintly discernible silver light shoot out and hit the hole. Then, the hole rotated in the opposite direction and slowly closed. In a moment, it returned to its original appearance, an ordinary stone wall. And Zhang Xiaohua once again felt a burst of exhaustion in her heart. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. It seemed that it was not the right time to immediately go out. Placing the 2 little beasts to the side, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged and took out 2 primordial stones. She began to absorb the energy from them. However, after circulating his qi for a while, Zhang Xiaohua discovered a strange phenomenon. Half of the qi of heaven and earth that he absorbed actually passed through the meridians in his body and was directly sent to his left hand, where it was absorbed by the silver eye hidden in his palm. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua began to practice God's guidance, wanting to replenish the consumed consciousness. But she immediately discovered that the consciousness was even worse than the vital energy. It was directly absorbed by the silver eye, and her own Dan Xian did not replenish the slightest bit. Well, this is good. Not only do I have to take care of these two little ones, I also have something that needs to consume vital energy and consciousness. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. She did not have any good ideas. Her consciousness could only cover a range of 10 feet in the fragrance cult. Now, it was even better. Only 10 feet was left. 10 feet it is. It's better than nothing. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and carried the two little beasts in each hand. She was about to walk out of the cave. Looking at the cave that led to the cliff, Zhang Xiaohua frowned. She had an idea in her mind. She carefully placed the little marten in her bosom, then used her vital energy to knock down the stone walls around the entrance of the cave, blocking the entrance. Only then did she form a seal and directly flew out of the cave to the top of the mountain. At this time, it was already afternoon. Zhang Xiaohua followed Huang Feng into the cave for only a few hours. But in these few hours, so many things happened that Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat overwhelmed. Looking at the sun in the west, Zhang Xiaohua roughly determined the direction. She floated down the mountain and directly flew towards the south. Zhang Xiaohua began to flee from the entrance of the Yulon Grand Canyon. She only wanted to avoid the sharp claws of Huang Feng, so she did not have the time to determine the direction. At this time, she did not know where she was or where she was in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Either way, the entrance of the Yulon Grand Canyon was in the south. But at this time, her consciousness was weak, and her vital energy was also lacking. Imperial Wind Technique? Then she did not need to use it. She could only use the ethereal steps and levitation technique. Although it was only a movement technique, Zhang Xiaohua was not much slower than the inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak. Not long after, she was already far away from the mountain peak where Black Lightning resided and arrived at a desolate forest. The forest in the Yulon Grand Canyon was lush with vegetation. It was rare to see a desolate forest like this. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not mind and did not have the slightest intention to avoid it. She leaped onto a tree in the forest and with a few leaps, she headed towards the depths of the forest. While walking, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly stopped. She patted her forehead and said to herself, I was just thinking about something and seemed to have forgotten something. Now that I think about it, there are so many luminous pearls in the cave. Black lightning and yellow wind are not needed anymore. How could I forget to take them? This brat did not have the slightest awareness of an expert and Xiaoxia. You have so many precious herbs in your belt. Which one of them is not more valuable than the luminous pearl? Zhang Xiaohua looked back at the path she just took and shrugged her shoulders. Forget it, it's a bit far to go back. Let's talk about it again when I bring Little Black back to pay respects to its mother. Well, in just a few hours, she had already given Little Black a name. But, it was really vulgar. Little Black. Little Black, don't blame me. The space in my bosom is really limited. If I put Little Yellow in, I won't be able to put you. Little Yellow was born with my eyes. You don't have to care too much about the distance. And, Little Marten will be called Little Yellow. After comforting Little Black in her hands, Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the sun in the sky. Fortunately, the direction was not off. Just as she was about to start moving, she suddenly heard the roars of beasts in the forest. Then, she heard a scream. It was a woman's scream. Chapter 669. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised to hear the roar of the beasts and the scream of a woman. Didn't the disciples of the fragrant religion already leave the Yulon Grand Canyon? Could it be that there were still disciples here? However, the situation at this time was already critical. Listening to the movement, it seemed that several fierce beasts were besieging a female disciple. If it was an inner disciple, then it would definitely be silently hunted down. Needless to say, it was definitely an inner disciple like Zhang Pinger. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua held Little Black in her left hand and the jade water in her right hand. She leapt towards the place where the beasts were roaring. Zhang Xiaohua's qinggong was excellent. Although the beasts were not close, she arrived in front of them in a moment. Under a withered tree, a petite woman was holding a long sword. She was struggling to deal with 4 white bears with their bloody mouths wide open. Although the woman's swordsmanship was exquisite, she was facing the famous white bears of the Yulon Grand Canyon. If it was just 1 or 2 of them, she might be able to escape with her life. However, the white bears had blocked all her escape routes. There was no room for her to dodge. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the scene, she was already in imminent danger. Zhang Xiaohua shouted, "Senior sister, don't be anxious. Hold on a little longer." After she finished speaking, she quickly jumped down. Holding the jade water, she stabbed the nearest white bear. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't have enough true qi and could not casually use the jade water sword light, her qinggong was exquisite and her strength was boundless. She was the nemesis of the white bears. After a few head-on clashes, she repelled the white bear. Finding a gap, she stabbed the white bear's chest. The white bear cried out in pain. Blood gushed out and it collapsed on the ground. When the other 3 white bears saw this, they roared. They abandoned the female disciple and rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not panic. She used the ethereal steps to fight the 3 white bears with ease. However, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua executing the ethereal steps so proficiently, a look of astonishment surfaced on the pale face of the female disciple who was already petrified. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua's face again, a look of pleasant surprise and disbelief immediately surfaced on her face as a blush appeared on her face. Zhang Xiaohua, who was fighting bitterly, held Little Black in one hand and the jade water in the other. She found an opportunity to kill a white bear. Seeing 2 of their companions die, the remaining 2 white bears retreated. They turned and ran towards the depths of the forest. Although the white bears ran clumsily, Zhang Xiaohua did not chase them. She stood there and waited until the white bears were far away. Then she turned around and smiled, "Senior sister, are you hurt?" The petite female disciple stared at Zhang Xiaohua and looked at her again and again. Finally, she probed, Are you Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohua?" When this familiar name came out of the female disciple's mouth, it gave Zhang Xiaohua a fright. She almost wanted to kill her. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's surprise, the female disciple probed again, I'm Chen Chen. Chen Chen from the Misty School's Mingzue Hall. Do you still remember? Ah. Zhang Xiaohua's mouth opened wide. She really did not expect that her luck would explode. She actually met Chen Chen here. Together with the little senior sister who followed behind senior sister Chang'e. When Zhang Xiaohua reacted, the first thing she said was, "Where's my second brother, Zhang Xiaohu? Is he still alive?" Chen Chen was also stunned. She just probed and could not confirm that the young man in front of her was the same as Zhang Xiaohua 4 years ago. She did not expect that Zhang Xiaohua would ask such a question. Seeing that Chen Chen did not speak, an ominous premonition rose from the bottom of her heart. She trembled and said, "Is my second brother? Is he? Tell me, is it the Xiang'ism, the Dalan Temple, or the Righteous Alliance?" Then she gritted her teeth and said, "I will let them use the blood of the whole gang to comfort my second brother's soul in heaven." Zhang Xiaohua was so excited that Chen Chen quickly waved her hand and said, "Senior brother is very good. Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohu is still alive. We were just together." Ah! Zhang Xiaohua was so happy that she grabbed Chen Chen's hand and said, "Is my second brother still alive?" "Ha ha ha, senior sister, why didn't you say so earlier? My heart is beating so fast that it can't stop thumping." Chen Chen chuckled and said, "Don't mention it. It's all because of your impatience." "You guessed before I finished speaking." Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "By the way, where is my second brother? Wasn't he with you just now?" Hearing this, Chen Chen's face became serious again and said, "We were picking herbs here and accidentally ran into a pack of blood wolves." Pack of blood wolves? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Before Chen Chen finished, she asked sharply, "What about my second brother?" Chen Chen cried and said, "Senior brother and senior sister were with me, but seeing that the horse was exhausted and couldn't run anymore, they left me in the tree hole here and rode the horse to lead the pack of blood wolves to other places." Zhang Xiaohua was anxious. She knew how powerful the blood wolves were, not to mention the pack of blood wolves. She immediately shouted, "In which direction did they go?" Chen Chen pointed to the north and said, "It should be in that direction." "Okay." Zhang Xiaohua heard and turned to leave. But Chen Chen dragged her and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, although you are good at martial arts, you are still far behind senior brother and senior sister. If you go like this, won't you die in vain?" Zhang Xiaohua patted her forehead and stretched out her hand to draw a big circle under the big withered tree, which surrounded Chen Chen in the middle. Then, she threw out several jade talismans and made an incantation to cast the inhibition. She shouted, "Chen Chen, you sit in this circle and don't take a step out. I'm going to save them and will be back in a while." After that, she stuffed Little Black in her hand into Chen Chen's arms and made an incantation. She flew up with the wind and went straight to the sky in the north. This. Chen Chen held the black puppy that Zhang Xiaohua stuffed into her arms with one hand and reached out to grab Zhang Xiaohua's clothes with the other hand. But when she saw Zhang Xiaohua flying to the sky, she almost screamed. Then she covered her small mouth with her hand and was stunned on the spot. Until Zhang Xiaohua flew out of sight, Chen Chen rubbed her eyes. If it wasn't for the black puppy in her arms, she would have thought that she was having a good dream. She looked at the roars of wild beasts in the distance and looked at the circle that Zhang Xiaohua had just drawn. Thinking of Zhang Xiaohua's advice, Chen Chen felt endless confidence for no reason. She sat down cross-legged and leisurely stroked Little Black in her arms. She smiled and whispered to herself, "This Zhang Xiaohua is really mysterious. I heard senior brother say that he most likely died at the hands of the Tenryas sect. Why did we suddenly appear in the Chuanxiang cult? And he has such a remarkable ability. What kind of mysterious martial arts is this?" North of the wild forest, on a high slope, a pack of thousands of blood wolves was surrounding two people, a man and a woman. The man was tall and held a long sword in his hand. He was trying his best to resist the blood wolves that were pouncing on him. The female disciple who was standing back to back with him also held a long sword. However, one of her arms had been broken and was hanging limply. Blood was constantly flowing out of her shoulder. The long sword in her hand had slowed down and the strength of her stab was also weak. Not far from the high slope, there was a wolf king with golden fur. It was 3 times the size of a normal blood wolf and was standing there leisurely. It was interested in watching the unyielding struggle of the two people in front of it. Thousands of blood wolves were quietly surrounding them. Only 4 or 5 blood wolves were surrounding the two disciples and were constantly attacking. 2 blood wolves pounced on the female disciple. The sword in her hand flashed and split into 2. However, the blood wolf on the left opened its mouth and bit the long sword that was already weak. The blood wolf on the side took the opportunity to open its mouth and bite the female disciple's arm. It raised its head and the female disciple screamed as a piece of flesh was torn from her arm. Her hand loosened and the blood wolf snatched the sword away. The female disciple's legs went soft and she fell to the ground. Feeling the person behind him fall, the male disciple was shocked and shouted, Changgu, are you all right?" He was anxious to see that he could not turn around to look. He only heard the female disciple gasping for breath and said, "Xiaohu, I'm afraid I can't hold on." "You, use your Qinggong to escape." This man and woman were actually Zhang Xiaohu and Changgu. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he looked at the endless pack of wolves and said with a smile, "Changgu, don't talk about the thousands of blood wolves. I can't even run away. Even if I could, do you think I would leave you behind?" "Xiaohu." Changgu was moved and said, actually, along the way, you had the chance to escape. It's just that, for me, you followed. Don't say that, Changgu. My martial arts are limited. Don't I still need you as a senior sister to protect me? I'm looking for you to protect me. AI, don't say these words to make me feel at ease. Others may not know, but do you think I don't know? Although you entered the sect late and missed the best opportunity to practice martial arts, your aptitude is top-notch. Not to mention your swordsmanship, even your attainments in the ethereal divine art have improved significantly. Even I, as your senior sister, am envious. Even sect leader O would be surprised if he saw your aptitude. If it weren't for the great changes in the sect, otherwise. Senior sister. Zhang Xiaohu wanted to continue but was stopped by Changgu. She said, Xiaohu, don't speak first. Wait for me to finish. I don't have much time left. There are many things I haven't told you. I know that you're still working hard on martial arts in order to revive the ethereal divine art. So, I don't dare to disturb you. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohu screamed. It seemed that he was bitten by a blood wolf. Changgu immediately asked, Xiaohu, where are you hurt? Zhang Xiaohu laughed and said, it's nothing, Changgu. It's just a superficial wound. It won't get in the way. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohu said in a warm voice, Changgu, actually, I've always wanted to tell you. Chapter 670. Since Changgu was bitten by 2 blood wolves and collapsed on the ground, the 2 blood wolves threw their swords on the ground and stood far away, no longer moving forward. However, the 3 blood wolves that Zhang Xiaohu was facing were still tirelessly pouncing on him, making Zhang Xiaohu unable to deal with them. Not far away, the Wolf King with golden fur seemed to be very interested in appreciating everything that happened before. I have always wanted to tell you, Changgu. Zhang Xiaohua said while facing the enemies, I don't know if you want to hear it or not, but if I don't say it today, I may not have the chance to say it in the future. Changgu endured the pain and said shyly, I know, Xiaohu, this may be God's arrangement. God knows my feelings and wants us to hear each other's hearts in our last moments in this world. You say it. Changgu, I. Zhang Xiaohu took a deep breath. It seemed that this sentence was more difficult than dealing with the 3 blood wolves. What's wrong with you? Although Changgu had lost a lot of blood, her face was still a little red. Zhang Xiaohu finally said the words that he had kept in his heart for 4 years, Changgu, I want to marry you. Seeing that Changgu behind him did not speak, Zhang Xiaohu was a little panicked. When he was about to ask again, he was inadvertently bitten by a blood wolf. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohu could not help but cry out. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's scream, Changgu's heart ached and she immediately replied, Xiaohu, I am willing. In fact, this is also what I want to say to you. I know. I am your senior sister and should not have feelings for you, but your shadow is deeply engraved in my heart. I can't forget you no matter what. Misty Hall, although other disciples confessed to me, I rejected them all. I was waiting for you. Zhang Xiaohu also endured the pain and laughed, what senior sister? You are a few months younger than me. This is what you told me. Don't forget, you don't know, Changgu, I have liked you for a long time. As early as, when we were still in the Misty School, I was thinking about you. However, I knew that my martial arts were low, so I did not dare to confess to you. I only practiced martial arts so that I could ask for your hand in marriage when I succeeded in martial arts. Moreover, when you told me your birth characters, I also knew your thoughts. So, from then on, I practiced martial arts with more vigor. I knew, as long as I succeeded in martial arts, you would definitely be my wife. Even if the Misty School was destroyed, even if I was humiliated by the fragrance cult at Shirxin Peak, I still believed that I want to be with my wife. Chang'e. Behind him, Chang'e blushed and murmured, Xiaohu, I am willing to be your wife, forever, forever. At this time, a voice came from afar, second brother. Second brother, Chang'e murmured again, hey, someone is calling second brother. Xiaohu, is it you? Zhang Xiaohu did not have time to listen. He just smiled bitterly and said, the only one who can call me second brother is Xiaohua. Poor Xiaohua, I don't know where she is or whether she is alive. Oh, Chang'e was a little confused now. She whispered, Xiaohu, my husband, if I knew this day would come, I would have asked the hall master to make a decision for me. What's senior sister? Junior brother? I just want to be your wife, me too. Chang'e, I should have asked the master to make a decision for me. Alas, Chang'e, my wife, I didn't marry you in this life. In the next life, I will marry you. Yes, in the next life. Maybe, later on, let a wolf eat us all. We can't sleep on the same pillow when we are alive, but can be buried in a grave when we die. Zhang Xiaohu's heart ached for no reason. The blood wolf in front of him took advantage of the gap and bit off the sword in his hand. The other blood wolf also took advantage of the opportunity to bite his thigh. Immediately, a piece of flesh was bitten off, dripping with blood. Zhang Xiaohu sighed and threw out the broken sword. Unexpectedly, it did not even hurt the blood wolf's fur. At this time, he heard Chang'e murmur, Xiaohu, my husband, I am cold, you hold me. Zhang Xiaohu did not hesitate. He turned around and sat on the ground. He hugged Chang'e and said, Chang'e, I will hold you. I will hold you for a lifetime. Chang'e raised her little face and said shyly, Xiaohu, kiss me, I haven't tasted the taste of a kiss yet. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu's heart ached again. He leaned over and kissed Chang'e's pale cherry lips. At this moment, a voice came from afar, second brother. Second brother, where are you? I am a pig head. Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu, where are you? Zhang Xiaohu? Who called me? Zhang Xiaohu was a little impatient. You can call me at any time, why do you have to call me now? Zhang Xiaohu still leaned over, but just as he was about to kiss Chang'e's red lips, he suddenly reacted in his heart, this person is called Zhang Xiaohu. Second brother, isn't that Zhang Xiaohua? Xiaohua. Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu raised his head and shouted, I am here. However, when Zhang Xiaohu raised his head, he immediately saw the surrounding blood wolves slapping his face. Chang'e opened her eyes slightly and said in confusion, why are you hitting yourself? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly, listening to the voice just now, it seemed to be Xiaohua's, but we are surrounded by wolves. If I agree, won't I have to call Xiaohua? If we die, but we have to implicate Xiaohua. His parents at home probably don't know that he is still alive. And Chang'e understood Zhang Xiaohu's idea. She said, quickly tell him to go back. Don't come over. He may not know that there are wolves here. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu immediately raised his head and shouted, Wolf pack, there is a blood wolf pack here. I don't care if you are little flower or not, don't come over. Run as far as you can. Don't come over. At this time, a cry of surprise came from afar, second brother, why are you here? Wait for me. I will be there soon. The voice was still far away, but when the voice landed, it was already close by. Chang'e muttered, Xiaohu, look, the god is here, we are saved. After saying that, she fainted in Zhang Xiaohu's arms. Zhang Xiaohu was concerned about Chang'e. After shouting, he looked at Chang'e. That person's voice was not familiar and he was far away. Even if he came over, he and Chang'e had already prepared food for the blood wolves. When he heard Chang'e's words, he unconsciously looked up. Sure enough, from the distant sky, a tall and thin young man with fluttering clothes flew over. In just a few breaths, he was above the pack of blood wolves. Looking at the young man's face, he was Zhang Xiaohua from 4 years ago. For a moment, Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. Ah! This is flying. At this time, the Wolf King not far away seemed to be tired of the tragedy of life and death. It opened its mouth and let out a long howl. The few blood wolves that had stopped just now roared and pounced towards Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohua, who was flying in the air, saw his second brother and Chang'e lying on the ground, covered in blood. He was already heartbroken. When he saw the blood wolves pouncing towards them, he was even more furious. He threw Chasing Dream towards the nearest blood wolf. At the same time, he landed beside Zhang Xiaohu like lightning. Once Chasing Dream was thrown out, it was like a dragon in the sea. The blood wolf that was pouncing towards Zhang Xiaohu did not even have time to react. With a poochie sound, the Chasing Dream drilled into its mouth and came out from the back of its head. After that, it made a turn and flew towards another blood wolf. In the blink of an eye, 3 blood wolves were lying in a pool of blood. Zhang Xiaohua landed on the ground and was not in a hurry to chase after the blood wolves. He quickly took out a few jade talismans and placed them around Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e. Then, he formed a seal to protect the two of them. The sober Zhang Xiaohu at the side felt that he was already in a daze. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua doing what Zhang Xiaohua did, he did not understand what was going on. However, the small sword, which was like a hidden weapon, was able to easily kill the 3 blood wolves that he had been fighting for a long time. This already made him feel a little relieved. Looking at the Blood Wolf King again, seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had easily killed the 3 blood wolves, it immediately became excited. With a low growl, more than 10 blood wolves pounced. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly shouted, "Xiaohua, there are thousands of blood wolves here. You can't deal with them. Your Qinggong is good, if you can fly, then fly away, or, take Chang'e away." Zhang Xiaohua turned back and smiled, "Don't worry, second brother. Since I'm here, I won't let anything in this world hurt you and, second sister-in-law." Then pausing for a moment, she said word by word, "Since these blood wolves injured second brother and second sister-in-law, then, let them know, some people are not to be hurt so easily." Before she finished speaking, she pointed her finger and Chasing Dream let out a light cry. Not long later, more than 10 blood wolves were killed. Following that, more blood wolves swarmed over. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flashed with anger. Taking out a piece of Yuan stone, she absorbed Yuan Qi while killing the blood wolves. Not long later, more than 100 blood wolves died under Chasing Dream's sword. Zhang Xiaohu, who was initially sitting on the ground, saw this and could not help but feel his blood boil. Standing up, he smiled and said, "Awesome, awesome. It's a pity that second brother's sword is broken. Otherwise, I would also kill the wolf side by side with you." Seeing her second brother stand up, Zhang Xiaohua was in a good mood and asked, "Second brother's injuries are not a problem?" "No problem, your second brother's physique is very good." "Good." Saying that, Zhang Xiaohua passed the jade water sword to Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Then second brother will use this sword." Zhang Xiaohu took the jade water sword and used his hand to make a few strokes. Smiling, he said, "This sword is very light." Then, he slashed at a blood wolf that Zhang Xiaohua had released. The sword pierced the blood wolf's neck and with a chi sound, it went through. He could not help but exclaim, "Good sword, good sword." Then, he let loose and fought with a few blood wolves that Zhang Xiaohua had intentionally released. As he stabbed, he said, "Second brother's original sword could not even pierce through the skin of these blood wolves. If I had this sword earlier, second brother would have been able to kill a few more blood wolves." Chapter 671. Zhang Xiaohu easily killed a few blood wolves in front of him. His confidence was immediately boosted. With a soft whistle, he raised his sword and stabbed at the other blood wolves. The first few blood wolves had underestimated Zhang Xiaohu and were easily killed by him. The next few blood wolves were more cautious. They moved around and used all kinds of methods. Zhang Xiaohu's jade water sword could not easily succeed. Hence, Zhang Xiaohu also calmed down and displayed his exquisite swordsmanship. He fought with the blood wolves released by Zhang Xiaohua. Although Zhang Xiaohua used his divine senses to control Chasing Dream and used the dream-weaving swordsmanship to kill the blood wolves, he still paid attention to his second brother's movements. He held a few jade talismans in his hands, waiting for Zhang Xiaohu to be in danger. He firmly believed that as long as the blood wolves were within his divine senses, the blood wolves would not pose any danger to Zhang Xiaohu. At this moment, he saw that Zhang Xiaohu's swordsmanship was exquisite. His sword moves were continuous and long. It was the first time he had seen sword moves in his life. Furthermore, he heard that Zhang Xiaohu's breathing, although it was a little rough, did not dissipate. It was enough to show that his inner strength was exquisite. Looking at the inner force in the sword moves, his inner breath was also stable. Although it could not be said to be vigorous, the flow of inner force was smooth. It complemented the exquisite sword moves and complemented each other. He was actually not much worse than Lu Lihong from Wuming Hall. No one knew the foundation of Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts better than Zhang Xiaohua. These two blood-related brothers came to Pingyang City from the Guizhuang house together. It was just that their opportunities were different. Zhang Xiaohua coincidentally embarked on the path of immortality, while Zhang Xiaohu became a direct disciple of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohua did not think that Zhang Xiaohu would be so lucky as to be wiped out in the Misty School, go to a faraway place to spread the incense cult, and have a heaven-defying adventure. Therefore, in just 4 to 5 years, Zhang Xiaohu could not have achieved much in martial arts. However, now that he saw that although Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts were not as good as the outer sect disciples trained by Wuming Hall, he was not much worse than ordinary outer sect disciples like Lu Lihong who had been practicing martial arts for decades. He could not help but feel secretly happy. He laughed and said, "Since second brother likes this jade water sword, why not give it to second brother?" Jade water sword? Upon hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu also laughed and said, "The ancients have a good saying, draw a sword to break water, but water will still flow. This sword can actually repel water, which shows how sharp the sword is." Good sword, good sword. Zhang Xiaohua sweated profusely. It seemed that the repel water sword had nothing to do with this ancient saying, let alone the jade water sword. She could not help but think to herself, second brother has probably been with young masterly Jin Feng for too long. Even his words are sour. Then he glanced at Chang'e, who had fainted beside him, and snickered in his heart. Perhaps it was his jealousy that made elder sister Chang'e faint. Elder sister Chang'e is a charming beauty. Second brother is so lucky. Father and mother will probably be grinning from ear to ear when they see her. In fact, when Zhang Xiaohua landed, he had already used his divine sense to check on Chang'e. He knew that she was not in danger for the time being, so he put her aside. Zhang Xiaohu also knew that if he did not drive away the blood wolf, it would be meaningless to save Chang'e first. Therefore, he held the sword and fought the enemy together with Zhang Xiaohua. Second brother, it's buy as in dark green, not do as in evade. Zhang Xiaohua corrected him, however, this sword has no name. I named it myself. If you want, you can call it the breaking water sword. With a poochie sound, Zhang Xiaohu stabbed the jade water sword into the neck of a blood wolf. He shook his head and said, since it has already been named, second brother will not change it. Moreover, this sword is what you love. How can second brother take away what you love? Zhang Xiaohua laughed and moved his fingers. In an instant, 3 blood wolves that wanted to break through the sword light were killed. He said, the ancients have a good saying, beauty is given to a beauty, and a sword is given to a hero. If this decisive sword is not given to a hero like second brother, who else can it be given to? Zhang Xiaohua was also happy. She had not said the words, the ancients have a good saying, for a long time. At this time, she also blurted it out. Zhang Xiaohu wanted to say something, but the 2 blood wolves in front of him pounced on him. He did not have time to speak. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua said, moreover, second brother, do you think your jade water sword is better than mine? Ah! Zhang Xiaohu shouted and punched the forehead of a blood wolf. Then, he stabbed it into its eye. Following that, he kicked the tail of the last blood wolf. Then, he stood up and stabbed the chest of the blood wolf. That blood wolf let out a sorrowful howl and died. After stabbing a few blood wolves to death, Zhang Xiaohu let out a long breath. He raised his head and looked at the countless blood wolf corpses within a 1 zhang radius of him. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air and blurted out, "How can this small sword of yours be so powerful?" "That's why, second brother, you can take this jade water sword and play with it. This chasing dream is my favorite." Chasing dream? Zhang Xiaohu was enlightened. He nodded and said, "It can even kill dreams. It is indeed stronger than breaking water." Pay. Zhang Xiaohua spat a few mouthfuls of saliva on the ground and said, "Children's words carry no harm, children's words carry no harm. Second brother, you are only chasing dreams, not killing dreams. How did you learn these words from young Master Li?" Zhang Xiaohu was enlightened again. He nodded repeatedly and said, I understand. Chasing dreams." Then, he slapped his forehead and said, "Is there a little girl called Dream?" It had to be said that the power of a direct bloodline was not to be underestimated. They had just met and he had already guessed Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. A few blood wolves escaped from the sword light and directly pounced on Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu laughed loudly and caught the blood wolves with his sword. He said, "You are angry out of humiliation. Xiaohua, sigh, I haven't seen you for a few years and you have a girl you like. Ha ha ha, you have also grown up." As he spoke, he was incomparably gratified. It is better to quickly kill the blood wolves and find time to save second sister-in-law. At the mention of Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohu's heart immediately tightened. He said with concern, "Chang'e, she is not that serious, right?" At this time, Chang'e was after all unconscious. How could Zhang Xiaohu be completely at ease? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Don't worry, second brother. After killing all the blood wolves, I will return you an intact and charming elder sister Chang'e." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua so calm and so confident, Zhang Xiaohu was secretly happy. But then he shouted, "Xiaohua, this is a pack of thousands of blood wolves. If the Wolf King summons more blood wolves, can you kill them all? Let's drive them away." Zhang Xiaohua said coldly, "They hurt you and second sister-in-law. How can I let them go? What's more, if they don't eat us, do you think the Wolf King will give up?" While speaking, Zhang Xiaohu was distracted and a blood wolf next to him pounced on him. After all, Zhang Xiaohu had been fighting for a long time. Just now, he had given up. At this time, seeing his brother come over, he regained his spirit. Even his internal force was exhausted. How could he fight for a long time? Seeing that he was about to be pounced on by the blood wolf, a green light flew and hit Zhang Xiaohu's body. Immediately, an invisible light shield appeared on Zhang Xiaohu's body. When the blood wolf's claws slashed, the light shield was only slightly dented. But it was extremely tough. Although the blood wolf's strength caused Zhang Xiaohu to fall, it still couldn't hurt Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu was pounced on by the blood wolf, but he didn't dare to shout. He was afraid that he would disturb Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing that the blood wolf's claws slid past his body and couldn't hurt him, he was surprised. But without thinking, he immediately stabbed out with his sword and hit the blood wolf's vital point. The wolf's blood immediately spurted out. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua jumped over. She stretched out her hands and grabbed the throats of the remaining 2 blood wolves. She exerted force with both hands. Gotcha, the blood wolves' necks were already crushed. She casually threw the corpses of the blood wolves to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, you should rest. Accompany second sister-in-law first. Leave this to me." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua easily took care of the 2 blood wolves, Zhang Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. How could she be jealous? She only smiled and said, then the capable will do more work. I will rest for a while. After speaking, she handed over the jade water sword. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "No need, second brother. It doesn't matter whether I have the jade water sword or not. I can still use my bare hands. Don't use the sword. Don't let the blood of the blood wolves dirty your hands. I want this jade water sword. You can return it to me when you are done." No problem. Second brother, let me show you my swordsmanship. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and took the sword. She then divided her attention and let go of the two blood wolves. The blood wolves didn't know that they had already become her test subject. They howled and pounced over. Zhang Xiaohua injected what little qi she had into the jade water sword. The jade water sword immediately shot out a 2 qi long sword ray. With a simple wave of the sword ray, the two blood wolves were split into 4 pieces. Sword ray. Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. He wasn't sure if Zhang Xiaohua had used the chasing dream technique, but the sword gleam on the short sword was something he had always dreamed of. He had heard about it from his senior brothers in the Misty Sect countless times. The second of the Misty Six Tigers, Li Jian, had used the green edge sword gleam to almost defeat the sect leader of the Righteous Alliance, Zhang San, when the Misty Sect was destroyed. However, wasn't the sword ray on Zhang Xiaohua's short sword a little too long? It made Zhang Xiaohu feel that it was an exaggeration. Zhang Xiaohua turned her head and smiled. Second brother actually knows about the sword ray. It seems like you are also an expert in the martial arts. Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua admitted that it was the sword ray and couldn't help but smile bitterly. If your second brother knew the sword ray, how could he have fallen to such a state? Sword light is a divine ability that your second brother yearns for even in his dreams. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "There's nothing mysterious about this sword ray. It can only be used when one has sufficient inner strength." Before Zhang Xiaohua could finish her sentence, she realized that Zhang Xiaohu had only been cultivating for a few years. He was not like her, who had been absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth. How could he have such a strong inner force? However, he immediately thought of what Valley Head Nya of Rejuvenation Valley had said. Wasn't the legendary qi-generating pill in the Jianghu capable of increasing one's power by 30 years? There were still many of these qi-generating pills in her purse. If she let second brother take a few, wouldn't it immediately make his dreams come true? Chapter 672. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, "Second brother, don't worry. Wait until we kill all these blood wolves, then I'll make your dream come true." How could Zhang Xiaohu believe her? He only curled his lips and said, "I know, Xiaohua, concentrate on killing the wolves. There should be a limit to how much you can comfort your second brother." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and did not speak. The two brothers, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu, had not seen each other for 4 to 5 years. They both thought that the other had met with an accident. Now that they saw each other again, they were naturally excited and talked more. In particular, Zhang Xiaohua was multitasking. While continuously using Chasing Dream to kill the blood wolves, she was also chatting with Zhang Xiaohu. Unexpectedly, she did not put the Blood Wolf King in her heart. At first, the Blood Wolf King did not care and only treated it as an interesting pastime. However, as time passed, more and more blood wolves were killed by Zhang Xiaohua, and the Blood Wolf King gradually realized that something was wrong. The Blood Wolf King looked up to the sky and howled. The remaining blood wolves received the order and moved, surrounding Zhang Xiaohua from all directions. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. How could he be afraid of these blood wolves? Previously, when he had just entered the Yulon Great Grasslands, he had already figured out the weaknesses of the blood wolves. After hunting for a while, he became even more confident. However, he did not panic as he took half a step back and returned to Zhang Xiaohu's side. Soon after, he sat down with his legs crossed. Holding a yuan stone in his hand, He wholeheartedly controlled Chasing Dream to protect the surrounding 10 feet area. Any blood wolf that entered this 10 feet area would immediately be assassinated by Chasing Dream. The Blood Wolf King became a little impatient after seeing that its attacks were not successful. It growled again, and the wolf pack's attack changed again. Dozens of huge blood wolves leaped out from the wolf pack and pounced on Zhang Xiaohua and the others from all directions. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could not go very far, but it could only go within 10 feet. Every movement was within the range of his divine sense. Although there were many blood wolves, how could their movements be faster than his divine sense? Like a dozen bolts of lightning, the heads of the blood wolves were pierced through like tofu by Zhu Meng. The corpses of the blood wolves fell to the ground, and Zhu Meng circled around a few more times before stabbing the other blood wolves to death. Good! Zhang Xiaohu, who was watching the battle from the side, could not help but exclaim. Hearing second brother's praise, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. He had underestimated the blood wolf pack. Just killing dozens of blood wolves seemed easy, but it consumed a lot of divine sense and a lot of qi. Right now, his divine sense was mostly absorbed by the silver eye of unknown origin. Even his divine sense that was gradually recovering was also absorbed by it. Although he was holding a primordial stone in his hand, the amount of yuan qi he could absorb was limited. If it was just like before, it should not be a problem. However, the attack just now made him see his own weakness. He could either rely on the power of the seal to defend or use the method of guerrilla warfare to achieve his goal of killing all the blood wolves. Of course, he also knew that if he could directly kill the Blood Wolf King, the blood wolves that were surrounding him would disperse. However, he had been chased by Huang Feng for the past few days. His heart was filled with anger. Now that he saw second brother injured by the blood wolves, he could not help but be ruthless. He wanted Chasing Dream to take advantage of the situation and leave the thousands of blood wolves behind. Therefore, he did not want to directly face the Blood Wolf King for the time being. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, you stay here first. Don't worry, I will be back soon." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "You go first. Leave the jade water sword behind. I can hold on for a while." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I still need to use the jade water sword. You just watch." Then, Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat puzzled and said, "Then how do I block the blood wolves?" "Haha, second brother, you don't need to. Just sit there and watch the battle." Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly and leaped into the air, throwing himself into the midst of the blood wolves. Chasing Dream followed Zhang Xiaohua and flew into the depths of the blood wolves. In just a few moments, another few blood wolves were beheaded. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua leave, the blood wolves at the side saw an opportunity and pounced at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu was also shocked. He wanted to dodge elsewhere, but before he could move, the blood wolf that was pouncing over was blocked by an invisible light barrier. It could no longer pounce in front of him. Zhang Xiaohu was even more surprised. How many mysterious divine arts does this little brother of mine have? Since there was no danger to his life, Zhang Xiaohu naturally turned his attention to Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. He used the levitation technique to drift left and right. Wherever he went, Chasing Dream was invincible. He did not care about the blood wolves' attacks at all and stabbed at the blood wolves' vital points from unimaginable angles. Although the blood wolves were innately valiant and rather courageous, they were still ferocious beasts with intelligence. This was the first time they were being killed by someone. After a long time, it was inevitable that they would be afraid. In the end, after a while, wherever Zhang Xiaohua went, the blood wolves avoided him and did not dare to attack. Its sharpness formed a 30-feet gap around Zhang Xiaohua and none of the blood wolves dared to cross it. Although Zhang Xiaohua used the levitation technique and jumped into the blood wolves when they were not on guard, after killing a few more, the blood wolves were even more careful. Zhang Xiaohua almost did not have any chance. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua was a little tired. The one-sided massacre just now had very well alleviated his hatred towards the blood wolves that besieged Zhang Xiaohu. With him around, Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e would not be in any danger. Roughly calculating, the number of blood wolves that died under Chasing Dream's sword was already around 400 to 500, which accounted for more than half of the blood wolves in the pack. Otherwise, the remaining blood wolves would not be so afraid. This kind of incomparable massacre really made Zhang Xiaohua feel very bored. Maybe it's time to end it. Zhang Xiaohua turned to look at the Blood Wolf King that was standing far away. The Blood Wolf King at this time was also constantly roaring, wanting to command the Blood Wolves to surround Zhang Xiaohua. Unfortunately, the Blood Wolves were all frightened and did not listen to its command at all. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua looking at it, the Blood Wolf King also signaled that this was the time for the final battle and howled to the sky. The surrounding Blood Wolves all understood the Blood Wolf King's meaning and consciously opened up a path. At the end of the path was Zhang Xiaohua, who kept the Jade Water Sword. The Blood Wolf King proudly walked through the path with its head held high, as if it was being admired by thousands of people. When it arrived in front of Zhang Xiaohua, it stared at Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also stared at the Blood Wolf King with interest. The Blood Wolf King's physique was obviously 3 times larger than an ordinary blood wolf. Its tall body looked exceptionally majestic in the mountain wind. Suddenly, the Blood Wolf King's thick hind legs stomped, and its entire body was like a huge hill crashing towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's body was tall and thin. Facing the Blood Wolf King that was a head taller than her, it was obvious that she was frail. The Blood Wolf King pounced in front of Zhang Xiaohua, and its thick front claws swiped like a bolt of lightning. Just based on this claw, among all the disciples who were undergoing the Orchid Evening refinement, perhaps only the inner disciples could dodge this attack. However, this move was far from posing any threat to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua raised her fist to meet the attack, nimbly dodging the sharp wolf claws, and her fist landed on the soft fur of the wolf claws. With a peng sound, the Blood Wolf King, who was caught off guard, was sent flying back. The Blood Wolf King was also valiant. It lost its balance and struggled in the air, but it couldn't avoid the fate of being thrown to the ground. After landing, the Blood Wolf King roared and immediately got up, pouncing over again. This time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't use her bare hands. Instead, she shook the Jade Water Sword, and a 2-foot sword ray shot out, piercing towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King was already prepared. Although it was inconvenient to move in the air, it blocked the sword ray with its front claws. With a dang sound, it was the sound of metal colliding with stone. The Blood Wolf King's hard claws actually deflected the invincible sword ray. Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. I didn't expect the Blood Wolf King to have such an ability. It seems that even the inner disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak would have to put in a lot of effort to deal with it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua pulled herself together and went up to fight with the Blood Wolf King. It was a very strange scene. Chapter 673. The Blood Wolf King's wind blade was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations, but it was also within Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. However, he did not expect that the Blood Wolf King would not use this kind of colorless and silent killing technique. This wind blade was really amazing. At first, it was like the sound of the wind. Following the Blood Wolf King's growl, it only started to move when it was close. If not for the help of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense, how could he know that this wind-like thing could actually hurt him? Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to turn his head. In his divine sense, the wind blade actually flew out 10 feet away, followed by the wail of a blood wolf. It must have been accidentally injured by the wind blade. Listening to the sound, it was already 40 to 50 feet away. To be able to have such a strong force from such a long distance, it really made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little scared. Good. Fortunately, young master's character is good and has always been releasing his divine sense. Otherwise, Tsk, at least his face would be disfigured. When the Blood Wolf King saw that the wind blade did not work, he was also stunned on the spot. In his impression, this wind blade consummate skill had always been effective in one strike, and it had only failed when facing the two kings of the Yulon Grand Canyon. However, this unfamiliar intruder in front of him actually, seeing that the Blood Wolf King had stopped attacking, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly surprised, then he laughed, "Good, good. I'll let you experience this young master's methods." After speaking, he flew up. The Jade Water Sword light spat out another 2 feet and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King. The Blood Wolf King was stunned for a moment. Seeing that the sword light was about to reach him, he did not dodge. He simply opened his mouth and shot out another invisible wind blade. Zhang Xiaohua also wanted to test the power of the wind blade. He did not dodge and directly pierced the wind blade that was flying towards him. It was strange. The wind blade was clearly a wind-like object, but when the sword gleam pierced it, there was an indescribable sound. Then, the sword gleam suddenly retracted and was suppressed into the body of the Jade Water Sword. "Io?" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. The Jade Water Sword was given to her second brother. She didn't want it to be broken now. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly pulled back her sword, not daring to use her sword to directly receive the wind blade. At this time, the wind blade was already close to her. Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her hand and simulated her true qi into her palm. With a sidestep, she dodged the wind blade and sent out another air-splitting palm. Unfortunately, this time, the wind blade showed the characteristics of the wind. The air-splitting palm's inner qi actually flashed and could not hit the wind blade at all. Zhang Xiaohua was a little curious. This is interesting. Then, Zhang Xiaohua put away the Jade Water Sword. Together with her right hand's middle finger and index finger, she pointed forward. The chasing dream that had been hovering in mid-air made a z sound. It was as if it was going to tear through the air and pierce towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King had already seen the power of the chasing dream. At this time, seeing that the small sword actually made a sound, how could he not know that Zhang Xiaohua was using her full strength? The Blood Wolf King was not afraid of the Jade Water Sword light. Not only could it block the wind blade, it could even block its own sharp claws. However, this small sword did not seem to be that simple. Just from seeing that it had pierced through the Blood Wolf King's head like tofu, it did not dare to rashly try. Sure enough, when the chasing dream came close, the Blood Wolf King did not use its front claws to block it. Instead, it twisted its body and that thick tail was like a huge shadow. With a "paw" sound, it slapped the small sword from top to bottom. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua slightly frowned. After seeing the Blood Wolf King's sturdy claws, she did not dare to be too careless. With a slight movement of her fingers, the small sword suddenly stopped in the air. Then, the tip of the sword went up and with a "so" sound, it met the Blood Wolf King's tail. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as the two collided. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was shaken, and the small sword was almost out of control. It swayed and fell to the ground. The Blood Wolf King also let out a low growl, and a few drops of blood dripped from its tail. It seemed to have suffered a minor injury. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and secretly said, "This Blood Wolf King is indeed not ordinary." Since the chasing dream made its move, other than being caught due to its lack of power, this is the first time it has been struck down by force. What should I do? Zhang Xiaohua could not go against the Blood Wolf King again. However, right after, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers moved again. The chasing dream jumped up from the dust and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King did not dare to hesitate. Since its tail was pierced by the small sword, it could not be careless about the vital point of its throat. The Blood Wolf King twisted its body and opened its mouth. Whoosh, another wind blade was spat out. Zhang Xiaohua also secretly nodded. Previously, they had been testing each other for a long time. Ordinary moves were not effective. At this time, they could only compete with each other's divine sense. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua also focused. She poured her divine sense into the small sword and faced the wind blade head-on. Poof! The small sword seemed to have pierced into a ball of soft cotton. It did not exert any force. Zhang Xiaohua urged her divine sense and pushed the small sword forward a little. The Blood Wolf King was also stunned. It opened its mouth and shot out another wind blade. The chasing dream could not withstand it and was pushed back in an instant. Zhang Xiaohua pointed her finger and the small sword turned around to get rid of the wind blade. Then, it dived into the Blood Wolf King's mouth and stabbed again. Seeing that the wind blade was effective, the Blood Wolf King was no longer nervous and spat out 2 wind blades in a row. Damn! Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Before she could command the small sword to change the angle, the Blood Wolf King also raised its head and shot out 3 wind blades in a row from different angles to block Zhang Xiaohua's escape route. The 3 wind blades were directly aimed at different vital points on Zhang Xiaohua's body. The one who strikes first gains the advantage. Even the Blood Wolf King understood this principle. Ha! Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Was the Blood Wolf King a human or a beast? It actually knew the art of war. However, he was confident that he could dodge the attack. He leaped into the air, but before he could stabilize himself in the air, the Blood Wolf King launched a few more wind blades at him. The wind blades were aimed at several vital points on his body without any hesitation. It can't be. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had forgotten that he was in the air, exposing all the vital points on his body. Wouldn't that make him a moving target? Seeing the wind blades flying towards him, Zhang Xiaohua did not care about the elegance of a peerless expert and somersaulted down. The Blood Wolf King took advantage of the situation and became even more unreasonable. Puff! 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 Another 3 wind blades were shot at the place where Zhang Xiaohua landed, blocking Zhang Xiaohua's escape route. Then, the Blood Wolf King raised its head and roared, opening its mouth wide. Whoosh! The wind blades were bigger than the previous ones and they were shot towards Zhang Xiaohua's chest. This guy is really vicious and merciless. No wonder he's a king. Zhang Xiaohua was in the air, looking at the wind blades coming from above and below. His heart was slightly flustered. Most of his previous opponents were martial artists. The martial arts that Zhang Xiaohua had learned were more than enough. If it did not work, he could use his strength to subdue his opponents. Moreover, the divine powers that he had learned for the time being were unfathomable. He had an advantage in battle. Even when he met Huang Feng not long ago, he only relied on his speed and claws to tear his throat. He did not use any other techniques. Now that he saw the Blood Wolf King's ability, Zhang Xiaohua understood that there was always someone better than him in this world. Huang Feng was not without powerful techniques, but because she was pregnant with little Martin, she did not want to harm her body too much. Therefore, she frequently used simple claws. If Huang Feng knew how to use wind blades, he would have died long ago. The water in Jianghu was really deep. In a flash, Zhang Xiaohua thought a lot, but he still had to dodge the wind blades in front of him. He moved his body and breathed, circulating the little amount of true qi in his meridians smoothly. His divine sense carefully identified the speed and gaps of the wind blades. In almost impossible places, he moved his body several times to avoid them. When the wind blades flew past, Zhang Xiaohua's body was already covered in cold sweat. It's all thanks to Yellow Wind. Under its relentless pursuit these past few days, my Imperial Wind technique has really made great progress. Not to mention other things, just the control of my movements has become much more precise. This Blood Wolf King is really despicable. Xiaoxia had just dodged, but it did not rest and shot out another wind blade. Do you not need to pay for these wind blades? Fortunately, at this time, he was close to the ground. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua plunged into the ground. However, just as he entered the ground, Zhang Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. He had escaped, but what about second brother and Chang'e? He did not have much time to think and immediately escaped. Sure enough, when the Blood Wolf King saw Zhang Xiaohua avoid the battle, it immediately shot a wind blade at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than the wind blade. He watched as the wind blade flew over. Inside the restriction, Zhang Xiaohu did not know the danger inside, nor did he know that the wind blade was shot at him. He only saw the Blood Wolf King opening his mouth and yawning. His brother inexplicably popped out of the ground and looked at him nervously. Did something happen here? Suddenly, just around Zhang Xiaohu, there was a slight shake, and even some light blue brilliance flashed. About 4 feet around him, there were some ripples. What is this? Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled. In the distance, Zhang Xiaohua saw that the restriction was not broken by the Blood Wolf King's wind blades, and his heart was slightly relieved. However, even if it could not be broken once, it did not mean that it could not be broken many times. The Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi in the Jade Talisman was limited and could not be replenished by the Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi. As long as the Blood Wolf King attacked repeatedly, it was bound to be broken. Zhang Xiaohua knew that from this moment on, he could no longer hide and could only face the difficulties head-on. Shortly after, Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade talisman from her bosom and gently crushed it. A light green protective barrier immediately enveloped Zhang Xiaohua's entire body. This was the first time Zhang Xiaohua had used a defensive jade talisman on herself. By the time Zhang Xiaohua crushed the jade talisman, the Blood Wolf King's wind blades were already flying towards her. Chapter 674. Seeing how ruthless the Blood Wolf King was, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Just now, he had killed too many Blood Wolf Kings, so he couldn't help but feel compassion. But now that the wind blades were constantly shooting at the protective barrier, the barrier was getting thinner and thinner. He knew that today was not the day to be kind. Letting go of the Blood Wolf King's wishful thinking would only bring disaster to himself. Therefore, he laughed and said, "The Blood Wolf King is only a so-so. Do you think I only have one jade talisman?" Then, he took out another jade talisman and gently crushed it to strengthen the protective barrier. Then, another jade talisman appeared in his hand. It was Zhang Xiaohua's best weapon, a dragon binding ring. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had a defensive barrier, he temporarily ignored the Blood Wolf King's wind blades. He threw the dragon binding ring in his hand into the air. The dragon binding ring grew in the wind until it was the same size as the Blood Wolf King. Inside the protective shield, Zhang Xiaohua secretly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Alas, fortunately, the Blood Wolf King is not that big. If it were bigger, my Jin Qi would not be enough. Zhang Xiaohua rested for a moment and pointed his finger again. The dragon binding ring silently flew towards the Blood Wolf King. When the Blood Wolf King saw Zhang Xiaohua throwing out that dragon binding ring, it was shocked. While it was shooting wind blades at Zhang Xiaohua, it also spat a few mouthfuls of qi at the dragon binding ring. However, Zhang Xiaohua controlled the dragon binding ring to not collide with the wind blades, so the wind blades missed. Seeing the dragon binding ring flying closer, the Blood Wolf King panicked. It sent out a few more wind blades, but they were like clay oxen entering the sea. It quickly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, the dragon binding ring was like a maggot. No matter how it dodged, it was steadily aimed at its head. The Blood Wolf King was even more panicked. With a low roar, it leaped into the air and ran straight into the wolf pack. The wolves received the order from the Blood Wolf King and started to run. For a moment, the entire slope was in chaos. The Blood Wolf King actually wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. It was really shameful for the Blood Wolf King's wolf character. If it was too late, it would attack with all its might. But if it couldn't win, it would immediately escape. It even used its own subordinates as cover. However, the Blood Wolf King actually used wind blades to attack Zhang Xiaohu. This made Zhang Xiaohua very angry. Since she already had the intention to kill it, how could she let it go? Zhang Xiaohua's figure flew straight to the place where the Blood Wolf King disappeared. Although the Blood Wolf King's escape speed was extremely fast, Zhang Xiaohua cultivated the Imperial Wind technique while being chased by the Yellow Wind. It was naturally easy to deal with it now. When Zhang Xiaohua found the Blood Wolf King covered by the pack of wolves, she couldn't help but become angrier. The Blood Wolf King was really vicious. It seemed that it didn't give up and actually quietly moved towards Zhang Xiaohu's direction. Zhang Xiaohua gritted her teeth and flew to Zhang Xiaohu's side, blocking the Blood Wolf King's path. The Blood Wolf King saw that its plot was exposed and growled. The pack of wolves received the order and rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. As for the Blood Wolf King itself, it turned around and wanted to escape. How could Zhang Xiaohua let it go? She stretched out her hand and took out a few light red jade talismans. She shook her hand and shot them at the Blood Wolf King. Unfortunately, the Blood Wolf King dodged and all of the jade talismans missed and hit the other wolves. A faint fire appeared and several wolves cried out in pain. For a moment, the scene became even more chaotic. Some of the smarter wolves quickly lay down on the ground and tried to extinguish the fire. However, they couldn't do so no matter how hard they tried. The burning wolves fled and passed the fire to the wolves next to them. Not long after, many of the wolves were caught in the fire. The wolves that were on fire earlier screamed miserably as they were burned to death by the fire. The rest of the wolves were even crazier. Seeing this scene, they immediately retreated and distanced themselves from the burning wolves. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the time to watch the development of the situation. He didn't dare to use the fire talisman because he was afraid that it would cause the wolves to panic and lead the fire to the Yulon Prairie. Since he had already used it, he needed to quickly get rid of the Blood Wolf King and then deal with the aftermath. The retreat of the wolves also gave Zhang Xiaohua some convenience. The order of the Blood Wolf King couldn't be heard by the frenzied wolves. Zhang Xiaohua could easily see the Blood Wolf King fleeing in a hurry. With a low whistle, Zhang Xiaohua activated the Imperial Wind technique and rushed to the top of the Blood Wolf King. With a wave of her hand, the dragon binding ring fell from the sky. This was a high slope. Without the help of the wolves, even if the Blood Wolf King fled, it couldn't outrun the speed of the spiritual sense. After a while, the dragon binding ring was firmly wrapped around the Blood Wolf King's neck. Zhang Xiaohua didn't delay and formed a hand seal. The dragon binding ring was large but small, tightly wrapped around the Blood Wolf King's neck. Then, he ruthlessly pointed with his hand. With a light "kacha" sound, the Blood Wolf King's neck was immediately broken by the dragon binding ring. A stream of blood flowed out from the Blood Wolf King's mouth and it immediately died on the spot. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also fell from the sky. The dragon binding ring consumed too much spiritual sense and Jin Qi. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use it because he was afraid that even if he killed the Blood Wolf King, his body would run out of Jin Qi. Then, wouldn't he die in the mouths of the wolves? Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He reluctantly used his remaining Jin Qi to escape into the ground. With 2 primordial stones in his hand, he quickly recovered his Jin Qi. However, before he could escape into the ground, the remaining Jin Qi in his meridians wasn't enough to support the escape technique. The hard ground forced him out of the ground. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He looked around and saw that the surrounding blood wolves were still in a mess and didn't notice him. He quickly hid in a bush and lay there to absorb Jin Qi. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Jin Qi in his meridians was replenished. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua's heart feel at ease. Worried about his second brother's situation, he didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly got up. Looking at the Blood Wolf King that was strangled to death by the dragon binding ring, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Fortunately, he had successfully refined the dragon binding ring before coming to the Valley Orchid Dusk. Otherwise, even if he could escape today, his second brother and Chang'e would be in trouble. Thinking about the yellow wind that was even more powerful than the Bloodwolf King, Zhang Xiaohua truly knew that he was dancing on the tip of a knife a few days ago. Then, Zhang Xiaohua patted Little Black who was sleeping in his arms and said with a smile, "It's all thanks to you, little guy. Otherwise, this young master would have already become a wandering soul under your mother's claws. If I don't treat you well in the future, wouldn't I be letting you down?" Zhang Xiaohua walked to the Bloodwolf King's corpse and bent down to pick up the corpse that was even taller than himself. He walked up the high slope in large strides, and when he reached the highest point, he looked around. Fortunately, although the yuan qi in the valley orchid was abundant, it wasn't enough to support the flames. After the remaining blood wolves were burned to death for 2 minutes, the flames no longer spread outside. At this moment, the blood wolves were somewhat scattered, but they still circled around in 2s and 3s. They didn't go far and were probably waiting for the Bloodwolf King's orders. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua raised his hand and raised the Bloodwolf King's corpse above his head. He opened his mouth and let out a long howl. The sound shook the surroundings and attracted all the blood wolves that were still alive. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua raise the Bloodwolf King's corpse, the eyes of the blood wolves couldn't help but reveal fear. Zhang Xiaohua didn't waste time with them and shouted loudly, "Hey! If you don't leave now, when will you?" All the blood wolves' forelegs trembled and they immediately clamped their tails. Like dogs that had lost a fight, they were about to disperse. At this moment, suddenly, not far away, a blood wolf let out a low howl. It raised its head to look at Zhang Xiaohua and the Bloodwolf King's corpse in his hands and slowly ran up the high slope. "What is this?" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He immediately took out the jade water sword from his bosom and stared at the blood wolf that was running over. The blood wolf ran to the front, but it didn't move forward. It only bent its body, bent its legs, and slightly lowered its head. The surrounding blood wolves also listened and obediently stood there. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. What is this? For a moment, one person and one wolf stood there in silence. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the blood wolf remained in the same position and didn't change. Even the surrounding blood wolves quietly stood there without moving, as if they were waiting for something. Chapter 675. Seeing the behavior of the wolves, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened, but he was also somewhat apprehensive. At this time, he understood that this pack of blood wolves must have a king to guide them. Otherwise, the pack of wolves may disperse or be eaten by other fierce beasts. Their inheritance of the king should be the way that Blood Wolf drank the blood of the Blood Wolf King. Well, maybe this was just a superficial phenomenon, and he didn't know the truth. But today, the Blood Wolf King was killed by him. Seeing that the throne of the Blood Wolves was about to be lost, this Blood Wolf King bravely stepped forward and came to him at the risk of being killed by him, hoping that he would return the throne to them. For the sake of the entire wolf pack, the Blood Wolf King was actually willing to sacrifice his own life. Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously looked at the Blood Wolf King in a new light. But what made him apprehensive was whether the Blood Wolf King, who had just inherited the throne, would continue to follow the will of the previous Blood Wolf King and attack him. Soon, the new Blood Wolf King immediately expressed its stance. After it led the wolf pack to howl, it immediately squatted down and placed its head under Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Then, it used its head to slowly nudge against Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. This was similar to the performance of the lazy dog in the Guizhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua naturally stroked its head and said, "Brother Wolf, congratulations on obtaining the throne. But I'm very sorry, I don't have any meat bones here, so I can't celebrate with you. Please forgive me." How could the new Blood Wolf King understand? When it saw Zhang Xiaohua stroking its head, it was very happy and proud. The surrounding wolves also seemed to be envious and let out a low growl. Suddenly, the new Blood Wolf King's face changed. Its nose twitched a few times and its face became even more respectful. It turned its head and sniffed Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. She thought that it was being naughty. She waved her hand and smiled, "Do you want to find a place to sleep like Little Black?" However, the new Blood Wolf King still put his nose on Zhang Xiaohua's chest and even used his mouth to enter Zhang Xiaohua's bosom. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She put her hand into her bosom and immediately understood. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he carried little Martin out. At this moment, little Martin's eyes were still closed and he did not care about the outside world. However, when Zhang Xiaohua carried little Martin out, the new Blood Wolf King immediately revealed a look of fear and respect as it quickly prostrated itself on the ground. The surrounding blood wolves were also half fearful and half respectful. They bent their forelegs and bent their bodies as if they were paying respects to their queen. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. If she knew that Little Black was so powerful when it was sleeping, she would have taken it out earlier. She had been so tired and worried for nothing. The wolves had been paying respects to Little Black for a long time. Naturally, Little Black ignored them. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she said, "New brother wolf, this child is still young and can't pay attention to you. When it grows up, you can pay respects to it." After that, she put Little Black back into her bosom. The new Blood Wolf King only dared to raise his head when he smelled little Martin's breath. However, he still did not dare to stand up. He crouched down and crawled in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He used his head to nod behind her. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua understood. This action was similar to what Huan did at the beginning. It meant that she was going to ride on it. However, this glory belonged to Little Black and she was just basking in its glory. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and rode on it. When the Blood Wolf King saw these people riding on it, it was very excited. It stood up and slowly carried Zhang Xiaohua down the slope. Seeing this scene, the entire wolf pack howled as if this was a supreme glory. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua could not be thick-skinned anymore. She took out Little Black and hugged it in front of her chest. Thus, the wolf pack became even more excited. The Blood Wolf King carried them down the slope and turned around a few times before walking towards Zhang Xiaohu's direction. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu was completely stunned. He was even more shocked than when he saw Zhang Xiaohua descending from the sky. These were blood wolves that ate people without spitting out their bones. However, they were as docile as the mangy dogs in the Guizhuang house. Oh, they were even more docile than mangy dogs. At least when they had no bones, mangy dogs would ignore you. Walking to Zhang Xiaohu's side, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down and smiled at the Blood Wolf King. "Well, you also worked hard. You should go back and reorganize your team. I think you also have a long way to go. I killed a lot of these blood wolves." The Blood Wolf King let out a low howl and circled around Zhang Xiaohua, but it didn't leave. It actually crouched down in the grass nearby. The pack of wolves behind it did the same. They were leisurely circling around in the same place, not in a hurry. Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat helpless. She really did not know what they meant. Looking at Zhang Xiaohu was also looking at her. Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, don't look at me. I also don't know what they are doing. My matter can be dealt with later. First, let's take a look at your injuries." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "All right. Anyway, looking at their appearance, they seem harmless. Let them stay." "Oh, don't look at me first. If you want to look, you have to look at Chang'e first." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second sister-in-law's injuries, when I came here, I have already seen it. There is no danger to her life. You can rest assured. But you, just now you fought for a while. I still don't know the situation in your body. Let's take a look at you first." Zhang Xiaohu said embarrassedly, "That. I don't know what you saw. This second sister-in-law seems to be a little early. If you shout now, only the two of us can hear it." When Chang'e wakes up, don't talk nonsense. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I naturally saw what I should see. As for what I shouldn't see, I didn't see it at all. Second brother, you can rest assured. After that, she grabbed Zhang Xiaohu's wrist. First, she looked at his pulse, then she transferred a strand of true qi into his meridians. After a round of inspection, Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohu's heart thumped. Then he comforted, Xiaohua, is it very serious? It doesn't matter if you don't know how to treat it. Wait until we return to Shixin Peak. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, it is a bit serious. Just now, some flesh was bitten off by the blood wolf and a lot of blood flowed out. Moreover, there are some internal injuries in my body. It seems to be an old injury from before. The meridians in my body are somewhat atrophied. It should be caused by my exhaustion just now. Ha! Zhang Xiaohu was surprised. Xiaohua, why do you say the same thing as the doctor in the hall? Your words are clear and logical. This internal injury was caused in the Misty Mountain Villa. There has been no medicine to treat it, so I kept it. Then he sighed, now, many of the brothers in the hall are injured. The medicine provided by the fragrant religion is not enough. This time, Hall Master Yang asked the sect leader for permission to let us come to the Yulon Grand Canyon to collect herbs for alchemy. Oh, so that's how it is. Zhang Xiaohua understood and suddenly asked, by the way, what about Captain He? Is he also at Shixin Peak? He Tianshu? Zhang Xiaohu did not expect Zhang Xiaohua to ask so suddenly. He hesitated, well, he is at Shixin Peak. Then he changed the topic, not only Captain He, Marshal Uncle Shui, Marshal Uncle Wen, Marshal Uncle Lu and the others are also at Shixin Peak. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed, I was worried about them. It turns out that they are still alive. He, are they all well? Well, they are all well. Zhang Xiaohu hesitated and said, by the way, do you have the blood replenishing pill of the fragrant religion? If you have it, give me one. Oh, if you have two, give me one and keep the other one for Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and took out a bottle from her arms. She threw it to Zhang Xiaohu and said, there are only 4 pills. I will give them all to you. It's hard for you to remember second sister-in-law. Ha ha ha. He. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and opened the jade bottle. He poured out 1 pill, but he frowned when he smelled the medicine. He turned his head and said, Xiaohua, this doesn't seem to be the blood replenishing pill. I have seen the blood replenishing pill of the fragrant religion. It is different from this one. Zhang Xiaohua nodded, of course, this is not the blood replenishing pill. This is the Yuhuandan pill. You have internal injuries, so it is better to take the Yuhuandan pill. What? Yuhuandan pill? Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. His hands trembled and he almost dropped the jade bottle on the ground. He cried out in amazement, this is the legendary Yuhuandan pill used by the inner disciples of the fragrant religion Peak? Zhang Xiaohua secretly laughed and said, second brother, look at how surprised you are. Don't say that you are my second brother in the future. It is just the Yuhuandan pill. For the time being, there are only 4 pills. Maybe there will be more in the future. You take it first. I will help second sister-in-law connect her wound to her broken arm, and then you can help her take it. This. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the Yuhuandan pill in his hand and thought for a while. He said awkwardly, Xiaohua, that. Do you have any blood replenishing pills? My injuries are not serious, so don't waste the precious pills. You should keep it for yourself. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua thought of Nie Qianyu and thought, people who care about themselves are indeed different from others. If it was someone else, they would have taken it even if they were not convinced. She immediately shook her head, I have no use for this. Second brother, you should take it quickly. This. If you don't need it, I will keep it for master. What happened to Hero Wen? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. She then thought of the news she heard earlier and asked carefully, is it because of your internal strength? Zhang Xiaohu nodded sadly, that is one thing. The main thing is that your internal injuries are more serious than mine. It has been so many years. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, yes, don't you have 4 pills? You can keep one for Master. But there is still Master's Junior Lu. She saved you and Big Brother before. Zhang Xiaohua felt a lump in her throat. Chapter 676. Zhang Xiaohua's nose twitched, and then she said seriously, second brother, don't worry. I'll take care of it. I'll give you enough Yuhuandan pill. You should take it now. You're my second brother. If I don't give you any pills, I'll be in vain. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, that's what you said. I'm convinced. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled and said, take it, take it. Take it as much as you want. As long as you keep the one for second sister-in-law, you can take the other 3. It doesn't matter. Then, Zhang Xiaohua's heart flashed and he instructed, I don't have that many pills on hand right now. I'll give them to you when we get back. But you can't say that I gave them to you. Huh? Why? Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously. I have my own plan. Don't ask so much. Zhang Xiaohua made a mysterious face. Zhang Xiaohu had no choice but to hold up the Yuhuandan pill and said, I'm convinced. Just take it. No one is stopping you. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes grumpily. She bent over and sat beside Chang'e. After taking Chang'e's pulse and checking her meridians with genuine qi, Zhang Xiaohua had a plan. She turned to Zhang Xiaohu, who had taken the Yuhuandan pill, and said, second brother, although second sister-in-law fainted, she just lost too much blood. She didn't have any internal injuries, and her meridians are still stable. You don't have to take the Yuhuandan pill. I still have the blood replenishing pill. She'll be fine after taking it. Zhang Xiaohu was unhappy when he heard that. He said angrily, look at you. You just said that you'd give your second sister-in-law the Yuhuandan pill. Why do you change your mind now? No, no. As he spoke, he walked in front of Chang'e and squatted down. He supported Chang Ji's upper body and poured a jade rejuvenation pill into Chang Ji's mouth. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, isn't she called Chang'e? Why are you calling her second sister-in-law now? Zhang Xiaohu blushed. It was a slip of the tongue. Then, with a straight face, she said, why aren't you setting your elder sister Chang'e's bones? Do you want her to wake up and beg you? I wouldn't dare. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue. He hit all of Chang'e's major acupoints with his fingers and skillfully reconnected Chang'e's arm. Then he cut a few straight planks from a big tree in the distance to fix Chang'e's arm. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu sighed and said, I heard that the fragrant religion has a kind of small bone congealing pill that can heal bones. When we go back, I will ask the hall master to get some from the inner disciples. Oh, that's right. Zhang Xiaohua slapped his forehead. He had forgotten about this. She then took out a jade bottle from her bosom and poured out a pill. Second brother, help second sister-in-law feed it. Ha! Zhang Xiaohu was very surprised. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua's bosom and said in amazement, Xiaohua, could it be that you have 100 treasures pouch in your bosom? You can have anything I say. You actually have a small bone congealing pill with you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, this isn't a small bone congealing pill. This is a genuine bone congealing pill. A genuine bone congealing pill? Zhang Xiaohu couldn't believe it. He took it and sniffed it. He shook his head and said, if you said it was a Yuhuandan pill, I would have believed it. Lingering fragrance peak has it. The bone congealing pill has been lost in the fragrant religion for a long time. Where did you get it? Moreover, this pill doesn't have any medicinal smell. How can it be a pill? Your second brother is very smart. You can't fool him. It's up to you whether you want it or not. You still dare to doubt it. Zhang Xiaohua made a move to snatch the pill back. Zhang Xiaohu dodged and said with a smile, "It's a good deal. I don't believe that you're using a fake pill to fool your second. Ahem, your elder sister Chang'e." After he finished speaking, he helped Chang'e feed the pill. Zhang Xiaohua took out some pills to stop bleeding and give them to Zhang Xiaohu. She helped him apply them externally and let him do the same for Chang'e. Only then did she feel completely relieved. She unsealed the sealed acupoints on Chang'e's body. The Yuhuandan pill and bone congealing pill were really miraculous. In just a moment, the medicine took effect. Chang'e's pale face was already slightly red. Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and said, "My body is warm and really comfortable. The wound almost doesn't hurt anymore." At this time, the setting sun was still shining dazzlingly and refused to set. Zhang Xiaohua also felt warm in her heart. Zhang Xiaohu asked again, "By the way, Xiaohua, how did you know we were here? We were so far away." Before he finished his words, Zhang Xiaohua jumped up and shouted, "Oh, second brother, I've been talking to you so much that I've forgotten about Chen Chen." Zhang Xiaohu was also shocked. "You met Chen Chen? Where is she? Is she okay?" Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "She was fine just now. Now, she should be fine." After that, she was about to fly away, but her eyes caught the Blood Wolf King and she immediately waved to it. The Blood Wolf King saw this and jumped up happily. Zhang Xiaohua flew up and patted its head as if she was patting Huan Huan. The Blood Wolf King was stunned, but it knew what Zhang Xiaohua meant. It growled and quickly walked in the direction indicated by Zhang Xiaohua. Dozens of blood wolves around it immediately stood up and followed it. The other blood wolves still stayed quietly in their original places. The Blood Wolf King ran very fast. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, it arrived at the edge of the wild forest. When it arrived, it did not wait for Zhang Xiaohua's order and immediately rushed into the forest as if it had smelled something. Before Chen Chen's location, Zhang Xiaohua saw a lot of black beasts in front of them. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, thinking that this was bad. Could it be that Chen Chen had met with some mishap? However, he immediately felt that it could not be. Although he had left in a hurry, he had set up the restrictions. There was no reason for a beast to break through the restrictions. Could it be that another beast like the Blood Wolf King had appeared? But when she got closer, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be stunned. She saw that in the middle of the beasts, Chen Chen was sitting in the circle that Zhang Xiaohua had drawn. Her beautiful face was pale and her lips were trembling. She held the black puppy in one hand and kept stroking the black puppy's back with the other to get rid of her fear. However, the terrified Chen Chen completely forgot to look at the expressions and postures of the surrounding beasts. They were all prostrating on the ground, showing respect to a king. Seeing the appearance of the beasts and the black puppy in Chen Chen's hand, Zhang Xiaohua understood the reason. She jumped down from the Blood Wolf King's back. The Blood Wolf King also quickly fell to the ground and respectfully bowed to the black puppy. When Chen Chen saw Zhang Xiaohua appear, it was as if she had seen her savior. She stood up at once and rushed forward. Thinking of Zhang Xiaohua's instructions, she did not dare to go out of the circle and looked anxious. Zhang Xiaohua walked closer and took the jade talismans. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, senior sister Chen Chen. It's all over now." "Really?" Chen Chen said in surprise, "Senior brother and senior sister are all right?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Of course." As if seeing Zhang Xiaohua in the martial arts exhibition, Chen Chen laughed out loud. Then she looked around timidly and pulled Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, after you left for a while, these beasts came and scared me to death. Hee, your circle is really useful. They don't dare to cross it at all. You are getting more and more powerful. You are really great." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and thought, although my restriction is useful, it's not as good as Little Black's. However, he could not tell her and only smiled. It's good that you know. I've always been low-key. Don't tell others. Hee hee. Chen Chen laughed again and said, I won't. Well, let's go and see second brother and the others. After that, she called a blood wolf and let Chen Chen ride it. How could Chen Chen dare to ride it? She had been chased by a blood wolf for a long time and even saw a senior brother being eaten by a blood wolf. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and jumped on the blood wolf king. She said, if you don't get on, I'll leave. Now you're out of the circle and don't have my protection. Chen Chen heard this and jumped on the back of a blood wolf. Two blood wolves roared and carried the two of them back to the high slope. All the other beasts also ran behind them. Seeing another group of beasts coming from afar, Zhang Xiaohu was anxious. Before he could react, he saw Zhang Xiaohua and Chen Chen riding a blood wolf in front of him. Only then did he feel relieved. Senior brother, what happened to senior sister? Chen Chen jumped off the blood wolf's back and tears fell down. He went straight to Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, it's okay. She just took the elixir and is sleeping now. I think she'll wake up tomorrow morning. Elixir? Chen Chen was stunned and said, where did we get the elixir from? But then he woke up and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. He said, thank you, Zhang Xiaohua. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua secretly said, how can I not save my own sister-in-law? How can I let an outsider like you thank me? Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the sky and said, second brother, it's not early anymore. Let's find a place to rest. If you didn't bring a tent, you can only find a cave. Second. Before she could say the words second sister-in-law, Zhang Xiaohu stared at her and she could only say, Sister Chang'e just took the elixir. We have to find a suitable place. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and pointed to a small mountain in the distance. He said, that's where we rested last night. But it's a little far. Isn't it inconvenient? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, it's not inconvenient at all. As long as you can carry Sister Chang'e, it's fine. After saying that, little Martin escaped from his arms and walked to a mammoth. When the mammoth saw little Martin, it immediately bent its limbs. Zhang Xiaohua patted its head and turned to say, second brother, you carry Sister Chang'e. Sister Chang'e will sit on this big guy. Oh, Chen Chen and I will ride the blood wolf. Zhang Xiaohu was naturally happy. He carefully carried Chang'e and jumped on the mammoth's back. Chen Chen didn't dare to ride the blood wolf and had to find an elephant to ride. Zhang Xiaohua was still riding the blood wolf king. The four of them went straight to the small mountain in front of them with a fierce beast. Chapter 677. Of course. Chang'e pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, as Chen Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve. That should be the case. Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength? Ah. What? This. How is this possible? The three of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Chang'e opened her eyes wide and said, Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength? Do you have the same kind of pill? Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to nod, she explained, maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it, it's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. Then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength? Zhang Xiaohua knew that Changa's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously. This situation is also because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty Sect's sect leader O, which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for decades? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish the meridians and temper the meridians. Zhang Xiaohu had taken the soothing meridians pill, so the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to those of experts who had cultivated for decades. Then, Changa said, there's another problem. Each kind of elixir is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I estimate that if you give the same elixir to Xiaohu, it will definitely not increase his power by more than 10 years. At most, it will increase his power by 3 to 5 years. Zhang Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, then, what if it's a different type of pill? This? Changa looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu, he had only heard of the elixir that could increase power, but had never seen it. Even in the Misty School, he used to pick up the licorice roots from the secret site and refine some elixirs that could increase power by a little. But this was not something that Changa could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much virtue he had accumulated in his previous life. When Changa saw that Zhang Xiaohu's power suddenly increased by more than 10 years, of course, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then, Zhang Xiaohua asked again, and Changa naturally thought that maybe there were 2 elixirs. This possibility had reached the limit of Changa's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase power, Changa almost thought that he was dreaming, or that Zhang Xiaohua was joking. Although Chen Chen's kung fu was not as good as Changa's, and her knowledge was not as good as Changa's, she had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she unconsciously curled her lips and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you really know how to brag. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought of the joke Zhang Xiaohua made yesterday, Sword Radiance. Sword Radiance was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of power. Since Zhang Xiaohua said so yesterday, could it be? Zhang Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite and dainty Chen Chen who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. If they could not be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So, Zhang Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's affirmative action, Changa almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday before she fainted, she saw that immortal falling from the sky. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase one's power? Even Chen Chen felt that her mouth and tongue were dry, and still asked in disbelief. Zhang Xiaohua raised her chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chen Chen stamped her feet and used her shoulder to support Changa who was supported by her. Changa did not care about their business. She only thought for a moment and said, even if there are more elixirs, Xiaohu should not take them at this time. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua and his brother were puzzled, Chen Chen next to them said, on the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of power, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now, he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his power, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully practices the internal strength that he got for free and uses it freely. After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You don't even know this? What did your master teach you?" Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, "It's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Chang'e and Chen Chen, I would have done something bad with good intentions." Then she cupped her hands and said, "Thank you for your explanation, Master Chen. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice." Bah! Chen Chen spat and her expression was very similar to Nye Chenyu's. But soon her expression changed and was completely different from Nye Chenyu's. She said shyly, "Senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation?" Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. "Oh, okay." Hearing that, Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chen Chen's hand. "Ah!" Chen Chen was stunned and said, You're really giving it to me?" Then she smelled it and then laughed. "Zhang Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all. Are you trying to fool a little boy?" He, I know this elixir is expensive, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, then don't give it to me. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous." Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and said, "One is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e." You even want to fool Senior Sister Chang'e." Chen Chen still did not believe it. "Chen Chen." Zhang Xiaohu next to her scolded, "Don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir." Chen Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhang Xiaohu. She did not dare to disobey Zhang Xiaohu's words and did not dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, she could not help but tremble in her hands, and the 2 meridian-nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, "Zhang Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me, and to Senior Sister Chang'e?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that Chen Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, "A gentleman keeps his word. I said it's for you, so it's for you." Chang'e next to her said, "No, it's so expensive." Before she finished her words, Chen Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, "Senior Sister Chang'e, this is 20 years' worth of power." Ahem. Zhang Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, "Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Why are you complaining?" Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She did not know that everything yesterday had been seen clearly by Zhang Xiaohua in the air. She had always put on airs and thought that she was Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhang Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be ashamed and angry? Alas, it was just that she did not realize it herself. When she talked about Zhang Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu and Xiaohu, but did not hear her call him junior fellow apprentice Zhang. Then, Chang'e was a little shy and said, "Since it's Xiaohua's kindness, I won't stand on ceremony. In fact, I also miss it very much." Seeing that Chang'e was not any different from the old Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother who was smiling foolishly next to her and really despised him. Then, "Xiaohua, do you still have?" Chang'e asked very hesitantly. She could not even finish her sentence. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, "Sister Chang'e, do you think I have many of these pills? Moreover, even if I do, can I let others know about it except for you?" Chang'e nodded and did not ask any more questions. "That's right, senior sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be?" Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. "You must be careful about this. Don't let others know about it, especially the people of the fragrance cult. I heard that the Misty School was destroyed because of this. We must not repeat the same mistake." "I know, senior brother." Chen Chen said softly, I'm not that stupid. Chang'e naturally nodded. Then Zhang Xiaohu asked, Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Chang'e and Chen Chen to take this pill? Will Chang'e's injury affect it? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, Sister Chang'e, the bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing it. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength? Chang'e smiled and said, when I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much. Well, that's good. Zhang Xiaohua said, it's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu immediately urged, then what are you waiting for? It takes 100 days to break bones and tendons. When Chang'e's arm is healed, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap, the environment of the Misty Hall is not suitable for taking this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulon Canyon. Zhang Xiaohu was even more anxious than Chang'e. Please vote monthly, please vote, please collect, please tip, thank you. Chapter 678. So the Blood Wolf King took the lead, with the tall and thin Zhang Xiaohua riding on its back. Behind them were 2 huge mammoths and an elephant, each carrying 3 people, followed by a group of fierce beasts, which were surrounded by hundreds of blood wolves. Together, they walked towards the distant hill. When they were halfway there, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. She patted her forehead and said loudly, Second brother, you go first. I'll be back soon. After that, she jumped off the Blood Wolf King, turned around and disappeared. Zhang Xiaohu and Chen Chen heard the sound and turned around. But there was no sign of Zhang Xiaohua on the back of the Blood Wolf King. This kid, she's so old, but she's still so careless. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head slightly and ignored her. He was only worried about the warm beauty in his arms. She could even enter and leave the Blood Wolf King, so why should he worry about her? Chen Chen's eyes were full of stars. She didn't have time to ask Zhang Xiaohua how she flew into the sky, but now she disappeared in a flash. What kind of elixir had this little country boy been fed? The blood wolves, mammoths and other fierce beasts ran very fast. When the sun went down, they had already reached the hill. Zhang Xiaohu occasionally looked back and couldn't help but cry out, Xiaohua, when did you come back? Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, when you saw Sister Chang'e's injury on the way, I came back. Zhang Xiaohu blushed and said, why didn't you say hello when you came back? This. Zhang Xiaohua jumped off the back of the Blood Wolf King and said, I saw that you were concentrating, so I didn't dare to disturb you. Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. He carried Chang'e and carefully jumped down from the tall mammoth. Chen Chen looked at the caves halfway up the mountain and her face was extremely gloomy. Needless to say, last night, there were dozens of disciples in the hall and it was lively here. Now, there were only 3 people left. How could she not be sad? Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to comfort him. Didn't she also feel terrible for a long time when she saw the disciples of the Pill Expansion Hall being killed? This was human nature. If this was not the case, this person would be heartless. The hill was not high. Although Zhang Xiaohu was injured, he could still climb it. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the surrounding beasts and patted the Blood Wolf King's head. She waved her hand outside and said, Brother Wolf, let them all go. I have seen your intentions. When your 2 little princes, or little princesses wake up, I will tell them. They can't see anything now, so I have the final say in your performance. So you don't have to wait here. It's getting late and we need to rest. The Blood Wolf King was not very human. It growled a few times. Except for a few beasts that seemed to be more qualified than the Blood Wolf King, they ignored it. The other beasts looked at Zhang Xiaohua who was standing beside the Blood Wolf King and reluctantly turned around and left. Then, the Blood Wolf King turned its head and opened its mouth. Its blood-red tongue stuck out for a long time and it seemed to be reporting to Zhang Xiaohua. It seemed that there was still some grievance in its eyes. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said, are you going to snitch now? Then, he patted its head to show that he understood. Then, he pointed at the hundreds of wolves around them and waved his hand. The Blood Wolf King was very aggrieved and it groaned in a low voice to protest. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. Where is the demeanor of the Blood Wolf King? Why do you look more and more like a mangy dog from the Guizhuang house? However, since Zhang Xiaohua had already told the Blood Wolf King what she wanted, it was not up to Zhang Xiaohua to decide whether it would go or not. In fact, if there was a blood wolf to protect her, she would be able to sleep peacefully at night. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua ignored the Blood Wolf King and walked to Zhang Xiaohu's side and said, "Second brother, let's go up. Oh, this mountain is quite high. You are injured. Do you want me to carry Sister Chang'e?" Zhang Xiaohu curled his lips and said, "It's just a small mountain. How can it be a high mountain in your mouth? Chang'e is not heavy. I can carry her. If I move here and there, I'm afraid I'll hurt my wound." He. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said to Chen Chen, "Senior sister, you lead the way." Chen Chen suppressed her sadness and said in a low voice, "Okay." Then, she stretched her body and used her qing gong to go up the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua jumped to Zhang Xiaohu's side and supported him with one hand. She did not use the wind-controlling technique, only the Misty School's qing gong, and slowly followed behind Chen Chen. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohu still wanted to use his internal force, but just as he started to use his internal force, there was a piercing pain in his meridians, so he did not dare to use his internal force again. Moreover, seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was effortlessly pulling him along and was not much slower than Chen Chen, he simply did not exert any strength at all. He did not even take a step forward and only focused on protecting the stability of his arms. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and smiled. She only used a little strength with her left hand to lift the two of them and walked up the mountain easily. Not long after, the four of them came to the mountainside, where there were 3 caves. The entrances of the caves had been repaired. Obviously, they were the caves where the disciples of the Misty Hall lived yesterday. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the caves and said, "Among the 3 caves, the one on the far left is the largest. Yesterday, our ordinary disciples all lived there. The one in the middle is a little smaller and only the female disciples lived there. The one on the far right can only accommodate 2 people, which is where senior brother Chen, the leader, lived." Alas! Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "I also wanted to say that it might be dangerous at night and we should live together. Since second brother said so, I guess you must be careful and not bully others. Then we have to let Sister Chang'e and Chen Chen live in the small cave." Bah! Not only did Zhang Xiaohua finish her words, but Zhang Xiaohu also spat and said angrily, "I am not Li Jinfeng. Is it necessary? I just told you about the layout of the 3 caves and also remembered the brothers who died yesterday. When did I go too far? Chang'e was hurt like this, how could I bear to? How could I let Chen Chen take care of her alone?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. His smile was filled with joy. She seemed to have never been so happy in the past few years. Zhang Xiaohu also pursed his lips and couldn't restrain his smile. The dark clouds that had been in his heart for many years were swept away the moment he saw Zhang Xiaohua today. Chen Chen also said quickly, "I'd better live with senior brother and senior sister. In the past, when there were many people and there was no place to live, didn't we still live together? Don't listen to this guy's nonsense. There are only a few of us. Senior brother will protect you well." Zhang Xiaohu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said to Chen Chen gently, "Okay." Chen Chen was like a cheerful bird and said, "I'll go to the middle cave to tidy up and make a warm bedding for each of you." Zhang Xiaohu said quickly, "Don't bother. Make a bedding for your senior sister Chang'e first and let her lie down first." Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "The bedding is not as warm as second brother's arms." Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red and he said, "I'm tired too." While they were talking, Chen Chen shouted from inside, "Senior brother, come in. I've made the bedding." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and blurted out, so fast. They were all used last night. Just tidy them up. Zhang Xiaohu said angrily. He greatly despised Zhang Xiaohua's lack of common sense. When they entered the cave, it was already dusk. There was already a torch lit in the cave. Perhaps it was used last night. Zhang Xiaohu carefully put Chang'e on the hay near the inside and turned back to say, Xiaohua, come and take a look. Is there anything wrong with her after the bumpy journey? Seeing that her second brother cared so much about Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua obeyed and stepped forward. She placed her fingers on Chang'e's wrist and carefully examined her pulse. Then, she used her true qi to check her meridians. In the end, she was still worried and released her remaining divine sense to check everything. Only then did she say, don't worry, everything is normal. With me, the great genius doctor of Rejuvenation Valley, nothing will happen to elder sister Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohua didn't expect that the Qi Huang technique she learned in Rejuvenation Valley would be used on second brother and Chang'e in Yulon Canyon. Rejuvenation Valley? Great doctor? Chen Chen was curious at first, then he laughed and asked, when did you go to Rejuvenation Valley? That year, Villa Master O wanted to go there but he returned halfway. Not only did you go there, but you also became a great doctor? By the way, I saw you checking her pulse just now. Do you really have medical skills? Zhang Xiaohua patted his chest casually and said with a smile, of course, great Dr. Zhang, it's true. Zhang Xiaohu didn't say anything at this time. Zhang Xiaohua had already skillfully helped them bandage and set their bones. Although she couldn't be called a great doctor, she couldn't take off the hat of knowing medical skills. Well, then quickly tell me how you learned medical skills? Chen Chen was extremely curious and opened her eyes wide. I'm going to faint. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his eyes. If it weren't for the torches in the cave, he almost thought that the small and delicate Chen Chen in front of him was the inner disciple Chen Chen of Lingxiang Peak. Why is every woman so curious? Zhang Xiaohua secretly said. However, he walked out of the cave and said, there are many stories in 4 or 5 years. Let's talk slowly. After walking out of the cave, the voice came again, I'll go get some dry wood first and make a bonfire. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was about to say something to stop him, but then he thought that since the Blood Wolf King had become Zhang Xiaohua's mount, he wouldn't be afraid of raising a bonfire and attracting fierce beasts. Sure enough, not long after, Zhang Xiaohua came up with a big bundle of dry wood. Just behind him, there was a blood wolf meekly carrying an even bigger bundle of dry wood. Zhang Xiaohua put it in the cave and the blood wolf obediently went away. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, good luck. I really can't help it. The Blood Wolf King left, but left a lot of blood wolves around. I saw them just now and casually took them. It seemed that only Zhang Xiaohua could make a blood wolf carry firewood. In this Yulon Grand Canyon, it was probably the first time in thousands of years. Zhang Xiaohu and Chen Chen were dumbfounded. Zhang Xiaohua easily made a bonfire. For a while, the cave became much warmer. Chapter 679. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua skillfully raising the bonfire, Zhang Xiaohu's heart felt sour for no reason. His younger brother had grown up with him. Even before they parted at Shitsu Mountain, he had never seen him tend to any bonfire. Now that he saw him skillfully, he didn't know how much hardship he had suffered. Zhang Xiaohu had forgotten that his younger brother was already an 18-year-old adult. He should still know the necessary common sense. People said that in the eyes of parents, children would never grow up. Wasn't it the same in the eyes of an older brother? Zhang Xiaohu softly asked, Xiaohua, where have you been these past few years? How did you suddenly appear in the fragrance cult? Why did you appear in the Yulon Grand Canyon? You haven't gone home to see your parents, right? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, second brother, there have been too many things in the past few years. I can't explain it all in a short time. Since I can see you, we brothers have plenty of time. There's no need to rush. Oh, I have already returned to the Guizhuang house. Father and mother are very good. Ha ha ha. Sister-in-law also gave birth to a big fat boy. Is that so? Zhang Xiaohu was pleasantly surprised. He hadn't heard any news from his hometown for a long time. At this time, when he heard the news, his eyes suddenly became moist. Good, good, good. Mother and father are all well. With big brother and sister-in-law at home, I can rest assured. Now that I have a grandson to hold, mother also has something to do. Look at you, it seems that you don't want to go home. Zhang Xiaohua glanced at his second brother and said, when I came out, mother was very worried about you. She heard that the Misty School was destroyed. She didn't know whether you were alive or not. I came to the fragrance cult to look for you. I didn't expect to meet you here before I even reached Shixin Peak. This god is really interesting. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, his heart thumped and he said, then, what should we do? The fragrance cult has always been a place where people can enter but can't leave. How can they pass our news to father and mother? Zhang Xiaohua stretched lazily and said, since you're living well, I'm relieved. Although my parents are worried, it's still good news. After a few years, when someone from the incense cult leaves, we'll think of something. Right now, it's definitely impossible. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment. What his younger brother said was right. Although the two brothers were outside, they were still alive and well. This was what his parents were most concerned about. It was only a matter of time before the news reached home. It was better than bad news. Zhang Xiaohua smiled when she saw that her second brother was a little sad. Don't think too much. Just take care of yourself. That's the best way to comfort your parents. Immediately, he looked at Chang'e who was lying on the bed and said in a low voice, he also brought back a charming wife. Father and mother will probably laugh their teeth off. As he said this, he put his shoulder on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and made a, expression. Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. Looking at Chang'e's red cheeks, his eyes softened and his complexion became much better. Looking at the sky outside, Zhang Xiaohua said, second brother, it is not early. I think it is better to heal your meridians as soon as possible. This internal injury can be cured sooner. Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled and said, it is still early. Healing in the dead of night is the right way. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, you have time, but I don't. When the time comes, I won't be able to protect you. Zhang Xiaohu was startled and immediately understood. He said with a smile, you still can't wake up at night. Shrugging, Zhang Xiaohua said, who knows? Having a good sleep, full of energy, and a good appetite is not a bad thing. Then, she looked at Chen Chen, who was lying beside Chang'e and snoring because of a day of fear. She got up and walked out of the cave. She cast a few jade talismans and sealed the entrance of the cave firmly. Then she turned around and said, I happen to have a medicinal pill for healing meridians. I'll let you have a taste. After saying this, under Zhang Xiaohu's incredulous gaze, she took out a jade bottle from her arms. It was the meridian nourishing pill that Zhang Xiaohua refined in Rejuvenation Valley. It was written in the formula that the main effect of the meridian nourishing pill was to nourish the meridians in the body and repair damaged meridians. Although this effect was targeted at practitioners of the Way of Immortality, the meridians used by the internal strength of martial arts were the same as those of the Way of Immortality. Presumably, it would be effective. It wasn't that Zhang Xiaohua hadn't thought of using the refined Crimson Flame Pill, but the Crimson Flame Pill was obviously a byproduct of the Meridian Nourishing Pill. Moreover, according to Rejuvenation Valley, it only increased one's power and didn't know if it had the effect of repairing meridians. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want his second brother to try this. Moreover, the Crimson Flame Pill was a medicinal pill of the Way of Immortality, and the Meridian Nourishing Pill was its byproduct. Even if Zhang Xiaohua was given 10,000 reasons, he would choose the best medicinal pill for his second brother first. Zhang Xiaohu watched as Zhang Xiaohua poured out a medicinal pill from the bottle. He took it with his hand and very naturally put it in front of his nose to smell it. He said curiously, "Why doesn't this medicinal pill have any medicinal smell? Don't tell me it's already lost its effect." Zhang Xiaohua shook his head with a smile. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohu said again, "It seems that apart from the Yuandan pill you gave me, the bone-solidifying pill just now, and this medicinal pill are all strange. Other good medicinal pills overflow with medicinal fragrance and have good appearance. This medicinal pill of yours, however, has nothing at all." "Right, what's the name of this?" "Meridian Nourishing Pill," Zhang Xiaohua said unhappily, "it's specially made to repair meridians. If you don't like it, then just don't eat it. Haven't you heard of the saying of the ancients, a good medicinal pill doesn't show off its appearance?" Zhang Xiaohu shook his head with a deadpan expression, "I really haven't heard of it." As he spoke, Zhang Xiaohu walked to a corner slightly further away from Chang'e and the others. He sat down cross-legged and asked, "How do I take this medicinal pill?" "Of course it's taken orally," Zhang Xiaohua said with a beaming smile. Immediately, she also walked to Zhang Xiaohu's side and said, "Second brother, before you take the pill, you have to tell me the route of your meridian's cultivation." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu shook his head like a rattle drum. "No, this is our Misty School's divine skill, I can't." At this point, he couldn't continue and covered up, "Without master's permission, I can't tell anyone. Even if you're my biological brother, I can't violate the rules of the faction." Okay. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, Zhang Xiaohua was also happy. This meant that the disciples of the Misty School still regarded her as a disciple of the Misty School and not as a disciple of the Misty Hall. This was what Zhang Xiaohua wanted to see. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged behind Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Take the medicinal pill, then follow the route of your internal strength cultivation and circulate the medicinal power in your meridians 3 times. You don't have to worry about anything else." "So simple?" Zhang Xiaohu couldn't believe it. "Can my meridians be repaired just like that?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded, "It's that simple. Haven't you heard that simple is true?" "Okay." Zhang Xiaohu listened to Zhang Xiaohua's words. Putting the soothing meridians pill into his mouth, he only felt that the medicinal pill melted in his mouth. His mouth was full of medicinal fragrance. Zhang Xiaohu thought, it seems that Xiaohua didn't trick me." Alas, if Zhang Xiaohua knew that second brother was thinking like this, wouldn't she vomit blood? When the medicinal pill entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current. Zhang Xiaohu carefully guided this warm current into his meridians. Then, according to the route recorded in the ethereal divine art, it slowly flowed in his meridians. Zhang Xiaohua sat beside her second brother and had already transferred a strand of qi to him. Wrapped in the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, it slowly flowed along the route that Zhang Xiaohu had pointed out. This soothing meridians pill was an immortal medicinal pill. Its effect on the martial arts meridians was still unknown. Although Zhang Xiaohua wanted to leave the best things for her family, she also had to ensure their safety. Zhang Xiaohua slowly controlled her qi to release the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill. The medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, combined with the faint star power in it, slowly, carefully, and quickly repaired Zhang Xiaohu's broken meridians. Previously, when Zhang Xiaohu lived in the Guizhuang house, he had lived in the same room as Zhang Xiaohua. When Zhang Xiaohua practiced at night, she also practiced the ethereal divine art. At that time, Zhang Xiaohua was already able to attract starlight, so when Zhang Xiaohu guided his internal energy, some starlight also entered his meridians. The effect of the starlight was still unknown, but as early as the first time Zhang Xiaohua attracted lightning, she was already able to completely repair the meridians that had been torn by the violent lightning. Therefore, although Zhang Xiaohu only absorbed a small amount of star power, it was still very important to him. When Zhang Xiaohu started practicing the art of ethereal divination, he was already 18 years old. He had long since passed the best time to practice internal energy. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to have greater achievements in the area of internal energy. However, it just so happened that this older disciple, who everyone looked down on as a direct disciple, achieved achievements that ordinary people could not achieve in 10 years in just 4 years. It was just that the Misty School was in a state of decline and no one paid attention to him, so Zhang Xiaohu did not have any opportunity to show off. It had to be said that all of this was related to the changes in his meridians caused by the star power that Zhang Xiaohu had introduced into his body. At this time, the Soothing Meridians pill itself was a miraculous medicine that could repair meridians. In addition, when Zhang Xiaohua was refining the pill, she had also introduced starlight into the pill. Wasn't the effect of this Soothing Meridians pill more than doubled? Furthermore, there were other effects that no one knew about. Zhang Xiaohua's true energy wrapped around the medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill and repaired Zhang Xiaohua's torn meridians bit by bit. After circulating one cycle, all the meridians were repaired. However, Zhang Xiaohua had previously told Zhang Xiaohu to circulate 3 cycles, so Zhang Xiaohu did not hesitate to start a new cycle from the lower dantian. Seeing that her second brother was continuing, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to delay. Just like before, she slowly released the medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill. This time, her meridians were completely repaired. The medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill and the star power began to transform and expand them. After one cycle, the flexibility and elasticity of her meridians changed dramatically. Even the width of her meridians had increased by 30%. Following that was the third cycle. This time, the effect of the Soothing Meridians pill was not as strong as the second time, but there was still some improvement and the width of her meridians had also increased. Chapter 680. After 3 circulations, Zhang Xiaohu's meridians were completely different from before. Just based on the refinement of his meridians, it could be said that he was on par with the 6 ethereal tigers of the past. However, when the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power returned to his lower dantian, there was still a lot of medicinal power left. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning. He instantly thought of the time when he was in Lu Town, when he rescued that little girl on the 7th of July and pointed out that evil thief's dantian. Since he could use his internal energy to poke a hole in the dantian, preventing his internal energy from being stored in the dantian, then could he also repair the hole in the dantian and restore the internal energy in his body? Moreover, since the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power could repair his meridians, it should also be able to repair his dantian. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua didn't greet Zhang Xiaohu. He wrapped the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power with his vital energy and slowly released the medicinal power around his dantian in an attempt to repair his lower dantian. Sure enough, the meridian soothing pill's lower dantian had the same effect as the meridians. Not only did it completely repair some parts of Zhang Xiaohua's lower dantian, it also transformed his lower dantian into a tougher and wider one. This kind of effect was something that could not be achieved by any other martial Dao cultivation method. Seeing that his lower dantian had been completely refined and that the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power was still half gone, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to withdraw her vital energy and whisper, "Second brother, the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power doesn't seem to be completely used up. You should circulate your energy and refine it. Perhaps there will be an unexpected gain." An unexpected gain? Zhang Xiaohu was also puzzled. However, he still followed Zhang Xiaohua's instructions and silently circulated the ethereal divine art to slowly refine the medicinal power left in his dantian. This tempering process was not a big deal, but rather, an extremely exquisite medicinal power rose from his dantian and flowed along his meridians. Every inch it flowed, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed, but he didn't have time to tell Zhang Xiaohua about it. He just focused on absorbing this rare opportunity. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother was concentrating on his training, she didn't bother with him anymore. He was very clear that since the Crimson Flame pill could increase one's cultivation by 5 years, the remaining Meridian Soothing pill should also be able to increase one's internal energy. As for how much it could increase one's internal energy, he didn't care because the Meridian Soothing pill wasn't the most important pill. He also had the illustrious, qi-generating pill, prepared to give to Zhang Xiaohu. After settling Zhang Xiaohu down, Zhang Xiaohua raised her eyes to look at the bonfire that was no longer very bright. She added some more dry wood to the side and the flames immediately rose a lot higher. The entire cave suddenly became bright again. Because Chang'e had taken the pill, her body was absorbing the medicinal power. Not only did she not look cold, but the tip of her nose also exuded fine beads of sweat. On the other hand, Chen Chen, who was lying on her side, didn't bring any bedding because she had run away in a hurry. At this moment, she was curled up with the black puppy in her arms and was sleeping soundly. It seemed that she was still a little cold. Pinching her chin and thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua took out the new clothes that Nie Qianyu had sewn for her from her purse and covered Chen Chen's body. She then got some dry grass from the side to cover herself. Only then did she walk to a corner alone and take out the primordial stones to restore the true energy in her body. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and raised her hand to look at the faint crack on her left hand. She revealed a bitter smile. At present, this silver pupil seemed to only be able to emit a silver beam of light and open the cave where the black lightning and yellow wind were buried. Its other functions were completely unknown. However, this thing was really not something that Zhang Xiaohua could control at the moment. Well, not to mention using it, it was impossible to make it behave. It had absorbed 90% of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense and 50% of her true energy. It directly reduced Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation to the 4th or 5th level of the qi refining stage. However, except for the faint tiredness in the pupil, Zhang Xiaohua knew nothing about this thing. She could only regard it as a treasure in her heart. That was all. Moreover, if she connected the essence of herbalism with this thing, Zhang Xiaohua's entire body and mind would be exhausted, so much so that Zhang Xiaohua did not even have the mood to pay attention to it. The effort and the gain were really not proportionate. I made a deal that made me lose money, alas, I was careless, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but complain to herself. However, this silver pupil had already trapped Zhang Xiaohua's left hand. It was too late to regret. Zhang Xiaohua watched as Huang Feng easily extracted the silver eye from between his eyebrows. When it was time for him to control it, he didn't know how to do it. He could only let the mysterious eye live in his left hand temporarily. Looking at the time, it was already late. Zhang Xiaohua sat down cross-legged, picked up 2 vitality stones, and did her routine homework. Not long after, starlight fell from the sky, enveloping Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was not far away. Most of his body was within the starlight. Tonight's practice was not much different from Zhang Xiaohua's previous practice. However, when the starlight shone, the silver pupil in Zhang Xiaohua's left hand gradually opened on its own. There was no expression in the pupil, only a faint suction force. Regardless of whether it was the starlight from the sky or the qi of heaven and earth in the vitality stones, it was all sucked into the pupil. The next day, the first ray of sunlight shone into the cave. Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and the surrounding starlight immediately disappeared. The pupil in her left hand also quietly closed, leaving only a crack. Zhang Xiaohua checked the vital energy in her body and shook her head slightly. It was only a little more than last night. The fruits of her hard work this night had been reaped by the detestable pupil in her left hand. She raised her eyes to look at Zhang Xiaohua. He was still sitting cross-legged in the same manner as before. However, at this moment, there was a faint white gas emitting from his head. It was the crucial moment of refining the medicinal power. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to disturb second brother. Her body floated up slightly and she directly left the cave. At this time, the sun had just risen and the sky was bright. It should be the time for birds to chirp. However, at this time, Zhang Xiaohua stood at the entrance of the cave and did not hear much movement. Only the faint noise of birds could be heard from far away. When Zhang Xiaohua looked down, she could not help but find it funny. In front of the small mountain, there were hundreds of blood wolves. They were separated by a distance of several feet. They were orderly and scattered, as if they were patrolling. They surrounded the area tightly. Presumably, the surrounding birds were scared away by them. The status of yellow wind and black lightning in this Yulon Grand Canyon is really indescribable. Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed. She immediately removed the restriction at the entrance of the cave and practiced the Big Dipper magical fist in the open space at the entrance of the cave. While she was practicing, she heard a shout from behind her, "Eh? Why is it still the same fist technique? You didn't learn any other fist techniques?" Zhang Xiaohua knew that her second brother had come out. However, there were still a few times left to practice. She raised her voice and said, "Second brother, wait a moment. I will finish practicing this fist technique." "Oh, okay. It just so happens that I haven't practiced the 6 fists for a long time. I will take this opportunity to exercise my hands and feet." As he said this, Zhang Xiaohu started practicing at the side. However, when Zhang Xiaohu finished practicing, Zhang Xiaohua still had not finished practicing. This made Zhang Xiaohu feel very strange. When he was at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, Zhang Xiaohu did not cultivate inner strength and could only practice fist techniques. Naturally, he practiced the 6 fists over and over again. When he cultivated inner strength, especially the Misty School's core inner strength, he already understood that no matter how exquisite a fist technique was, as long as it met with exquisite inner strength, it would be unrivaled. Therefore, he had already put all his energy into cultivating inner strength. It had also been a long time since he practiced the 6 fists. Now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohua not only learned this fist technique, but also practiced it over and over again, he was puzzled. When Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the last round, he could not help but ask the question in his heart. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Everyone has their own fate. How about this, second brother, let's spar. You can use all your inner strength. We will know after we spar." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he did not reply. He took a big stride forward and leaped in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He raised his hand and struck out with a palm. It was one of the moves of the 6 fists. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and raised her arm to catch it. This move seemed right but was actually wrong. However, it blocked Zhang Xiaohu's angle of attack. Because he was sparring with his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu did not use his inner strength in the beginning. After more than 10 moves like this, he did not gain any advantage at all. Only then did he gradually use his inner strength. However, as Zhang Xiaohu's inner strength increased, Zhang Xiaohua's strength also gradually increased. Zhang Xiaohu still did not gain any advantage. When he thought of his younger brother's divine ability, Zhang Xiaohu did not hold back anymore. He used all his inner strength and did not hold back with his fists and legs. He attacked Zhang Xiaohua with all his strength. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, which covered an area of 3 feet. She did not use her true qi. She began to rely only on her strength to fight with Zhang Xiaohu. After dozens of moves, Zhang Xiaohu's moves gradually became smooth and his control of his inner strength was also skillful. Above his head, a faint white mist gradually condensed into a line, which went straight up faintly. At this time, the sound of the 2 brothers fighting had already awakened the 2 people in the cave. Chang'e slowly walked out with the help of Qin Chen. Chang'e should have heard Qin Chen's explanation. Therefore, she only glanced at Zhang Xiaohua's face, which did not change much. Then she saw the white line on Zhang Xiaohu's head. Immediately, her face was full of horror. Her small cherry mouth was wide open at this time, but her eyes were full of joy. Chen Chen, on the other hand, looked at the two people who seemed to be fighting with their lives. He was somewhat puzzled. He held the black puppy in one hand and supported Chang'e in the other. He stood there very strangely. At this time, he heard Zhang Xiaohu shout, "Xiaohua, I'm going to use my full strength. If you can't block it, then move aside." As he spoke, he put his palms together and directly hit Zhang Xiaohua's chest with an earth-shattering force. How could Zhang Xiaohua dodge? She raised one arm and her palm horizontally, blocking Zhang Xiaohu's palms. At this time, she no longer used pure strength. She used some of her true qi and used the soaring dragon mantra on her arm. Chapter 681. The soaring dragon cultivation method was indeed exquisite. Only 30% of his jinqi was able to suppress Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid at all and was able to easily block his internal energy, his heart was filled with joy. Last night, Zhang Xiaohu used his internal energy to refine the effects of the Meridian Nourishing Pill. Although he used an entire night of hard work, his foundation was still poor. He had only cultivated for 4 years, so by the time the sun rose, there was still a small portion of the medicinal effects that had not been refined. Furthermore, just the Crimson Flame Pill alone was able to increase one's internal energy by 5 years. If it was refined using the Immortal Tao method, it would be able to increase one's internal energy by 15 years. Zhang Xiaohua's internal energy had suddenly increased by 10 years for no reason. How could she freely control it? He took the opportunity to exchange pointers with Zhang Xiaohua. On one hand, he wanted to exercise his hands and feet. On the other hand, he wanted to use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the 10 years of internal energy that he had just obtained. Zhang Xiaohu originally wanted to slowly refine the remaining medicinal effects in his dantian in the future. However, now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was able to easily block his internal energy, a thought arose in his mind. Wasn't this a great opportunity to refine the remaining medicinal effects? Therefore, he immediately silently used the divine ethereal art and urged the medicinal effects in his dantian to rush into his meridians. Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother's internal energy had reached its peak and suddenly had new internal energy. She originally wanted to dissuade him, but she immediately understood. She smiled and said, "Second brother, so you still have some medicinal effects that you haven't refined. Then I'll give you a hand." After she finished speaking, she increased the amount of jinqi in her hand. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still able to speak in such a battle of internal energy, Zhang Xiaohu's heart felt more at ease. He urged the medicinal effects and directly rushed to his arm. Chang'e and Chen Chen's expressions changed slightly when they saw the two of them directly fighting with their internal energy. Especially Chang'e. When she saw Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy surge, she was afraid that he would accidentally injure Zhang Xiaohua. Now that she saw Zhang Xiaohua speak so easily, she let out a sigh of relief. She immediately thought about how she had descended from the sky yesterday and subdued the entire blood wolf pack. How could she be injured by Zhang Xiaohu's hands? After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhang Xiaohua felt that the internal energy coming from her second brother's hand. She immediately said, "Second brother, the medicinal effects should be completely refined. You should slowly withdraw your energy." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he did not dare to delay and slowly withdrew his internal energy. Fortunately, this was a battle between brothers. Zhang Xiaohu also knew that his younger brother would definitely not take the opportunity to attack. Otherwise, when he withdrew his internal energy, his opponent would take the opportunity to attack him. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. When Zhang Xiaohu withdrew a portion of his internal energy, Zhang Xiaohua also withdrew a portion. After a while, both of their hands had no internal energy left. Zhang Xiaohu did not care about anything else. He immediately sat cross-legged with his palms facing the sky and quietly adjusted his internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she nodded slightly to Changgu and Chen Chen who were standing beside her. She stood beside Zhang Xiaohu and released her divine sense to protect him. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not practice internal energy, she knew the dangers involved. Back then, words such as qi deviation were always on the tip of her tongue. Now that she saw her second brother immediately adjusting his internal energy without asking anything, she knew the reason. Chang Ji's body had not yet recovered, so the responsibility of protecting him must be taken up by him. At this time, within Zhang Xiaohu's meridians, due to the impact of Zhang Xiaohua's powerful internal energy and his own deliberate indulgence, the last part of the medicinal effect of the meridian nourishing pill had been forcibly refined. The surging internal energy madly produced in Zhang Xiaohu's lower dantian and then rushed into the meridians in his body. Zhang Xiaohu was now like a weak child, trying to use his slender arms to control a small boat. He felt very powerless. Fortunately, his meridians had been transformed by the meridian nourishing pill last night. They were tougher and wider than most people's meridians. Under the impact of the huge internal energy, there was not the slightest damage. Under the galloping internal energy, there were even signs of the meridians faintly expanding. Zhang Xiaohu did not dare to be careless. He calmly guarded his heart and tried to control the somewhat crazy internal energy. It went along the meridians in his body, one cycle after another. Changgu, who stood to the side and did not speak, was more nervous than Zhang Xiaohu at this time. The internal energy in Zhang Xiaohu's meridians was frantic. From the outside, his face was constantly changing between green and red. The white qi that had been condensed into a line above his head was sometimes scattered and sometimes gathered. It was a sign of qi deviation. However, even though Chang Ji's fingernails were clenched into the flesh, she could not help Zhang Xiaohu in the slightest. At this moment, Changgu almost wanted to suffer for Zhang Xiaohu. Changgu felt that Zhang Xiaohu was in danger. Zhang Xiaohua, who had already released her divine sense, was one step ahead of him. She saw Zhang Xiaohua stretch out her finger, which was only a few inches away from Zhang Xiaohu's back. As long as she saw the slightest trace of inheritance, she would immediately point it out. However, Zhang Xiaohua herself was also clear that the internal energy cultivation should be the same as the true qi. Only when she could control it, it could be her own cultivation. If she had the help of others, her future achievements would inevitably be limited. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the true qi on Zhang Xiaohua's finger could not be transferred. In another half a cup of tea's time, she did not know how many cycles the internal energy had run in Zhang Xiaohu's body. She only saw that Zhang Xiaohu's face was becoming more and more normal, and the white line condensed by the internal energy above his head was gradually condensed. It became more and more shaped, pointing straight to the sky. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's finger quietly withdrew. In fact, she did not point this finger at the beginning. Zhang Xiaohua already knew in her heart that the most difficult moment had passed. In the future, Zhang Xiaohu could only be more skillful, and there was no need for her to intervene. Sure enough, in another half a cup of tea's time, the white line above Zhang Xiaohu's head gradually disappeared. Following that, Zhang Xiaohu opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with surprise. When he woke up in the morning, he only roughly checked his internal energy. He only knew that it had increased by a lot, but as for how much, he did not have a direct idea. He immediately compared it with Zhang Xiaohua. At this time, he had refined the remaining medicinal power of the soothing pulse pill and combined it with the internal energy that had increased last night. At this time, he felt that the internal energy in his meridians was like a turbulent river, continuous and unending. It was a realm that he had never dreamed of before. When he raised his head and was about to ask Zhang Xiaohua, he saw a pair of watery eyes looking at him with concern. Immediately, his face revealed a gentle expression, and he said with a smile, "Are you okay?" Changa's face was slightly red, as if she was thinking of yesterday's charm and gentleness. She slightly lowered her head and said in a soft voice, "I'm okay. How about the injuries on your body?" Does it still hurt? It didn't hurt a long time ago. The places where I was bitten by the blood wolf and the places where my bones were broken are all warm and itchy. I think it's because of the magic of Xiaohua's pill yesterday. Immediately, she said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, thank you." Second. Sister Chang'e, we're all family. Please don't mention the word, thank you. This family did not know whether it was the Zhang family or the Tamisti school. In short, Chang'e was embarrassed to think too much. She looked at Zhang Xiaohu again and probed, "Xiaohua, just now when you were practicing martial arts with Xiaohua, it seems that your internal energy has improved a lot. And when you were practicing your internal energy, you actually condensed it into a line. This is the appearance of internal energy practicing to the perfection stage. You." Zhang Xiaohu talked about what happened yesterday and just now. He also said in a puzzled tone, "I feel that I have a lot of internal energy in my body, but I don't know to what extent I've practiced it." Chang'e laughed out loud. Zhang Xiaohu was telling the truth. He had only practiced internal energy for a few years. In addition to the changes in the Misty School, he didn't have a better practice environment. He didn't know a lot of basic knowledge. Of course, he didn't know to what extent he had practiced his internal energy. In fact, even Zhang Xiaohua didn't know this question. If he answered, it would only be a number from Rejuvenation Valley. "Come here and let me see." Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohu obediently walked in front of Chang'e and stretched out his hand. Chang'e stretched out her hand and a stream of internal energy entered Zhang Xiaohu's meridians. As the internal energy went deeper, Chang'e's face was first filled with surprise, but it slowly turned into confusion. She frowned slightly. Seeing Chang'e like this, Zhang Xiaohu was also nervous. When Chang'e finally withdrew her hand, he immediately asked, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, was also watching anxiously. He didn't want to ruin his second brother's cultivation with his good intentions. Chang'e pondered for a moment and said hesitantly, "There's nothing wrong. It just feels a little strange." Chen Chen also said, "Senior sister, is it that the appearance of senior brother condensing his qi into a line is different from his actual cultivation?" "Yes, it's like that." Chang'e nodded and said, "When the internal energy is condensed into a line, it should be more than 30 years of internal energy cultivation. How many years have you been cultivating? How can you have such an achievement? However, the internal energy in your meridians is abundant. Although it's not 30 years, it should still be more than 20 years of internal energy cultivation." "Ah!" Zhang Xiaohu was dumbfounded and said with his mouth wide open, "Chang'e, are you sure you didn't see wrong? I actually have more than 20 years of cultivation." Chang'e still nodded. "I've been cultivating internal energy for more than 10 years. Although I don't know what 30 years of internal energy cultivation is like, I've heard about it from Master. Previously, you worked hard to cultivate and made rapid progress. 4 years of hard work is equivalent to 7 years of other people's internal energy cultivation. However, after I didn't see you for a night, I woke up and found that your cultivation is something I can't even catch up to." As she spoke, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Zhang Xiaohu knew that his cultivation had improved greatly, but he didn't expect it to be such a huge improvement. This good news made him feel a little dizzy. He could only open his mouth and smile foolishly. Zhang Xiaohua next to him asked, "Sister Chang'e, my second brother's internal energy has improved by leaps and bounds. Is there anything wrong with it?" You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.